Chapter 13:11. Bai Xiaowen adopted Sun Yu's plan. He ordered Su Huang to fight Ma Chao and arranged for 4 ambushes. After the arrangements were made, Bai Xiaowen immediately received a notification: Sun Yu's special skill, Ingenuity, has been activated. The surprise troops will receive 12% attack speed and 12% movement speed bonus. The so-called surprise troops referred to the 4 ambushes. Bai Xiaowen nodded secretly. Although Sun Yu was not like Sun Yu, who had a heaven-defying bonus to the monarch, he was still very useful as a military advisor. Sun family of Yingchuan was really a treasure. Bai Xiaowen could not help but think of the missing Sun Chen. Where did this former advisor of Yuan Shao run off to? He had to ask Sun Yu and his nephew when he had time. It was worth mentioning that Sun Yu's ingenuity could give a maximum bonus of 25%. However, it was related to the ingenuity of the strategy. For example, this ambush from 4 sides was just a normal strategy for Sun Yu. Therefore, the bonus was also very normal. The 2 armies faced off. Bai Xiaowen spent another 100 spiritual energy points to use Insight on Ma Chao. He found that after a few days, Ma Chao's vengeance status had weakened again. His strength had decreased by 7 points and his agility by 8 points. Standing behind the ice wall, Bai Xiaowen said loudly, "Ma Chao, you saw that my camp was built in one night. It is clear that the heavens are protecting me. Going against me is going against the imperial court. Are you still going to be stubborn? Put down your weapons and surrender, and you will not lose your marquis title." Ma Chao said sternly, "Traitor Yuan. Do you think I will be afraid of you when you use Taoist Yao arts to build a city? With this kind of Yao art, you are the one who murdered my father." Bai Xiaowen, Ma Chao attacked with his spear. Su Huang jumped on his horse to meet him. After a dozen rounds, Su Huang could not hold his ground. He feinted with his axe and turned to leave. After winning the battle, Ma Chao's morale rose. Pound ordered the drums to be beaten. The Western Liang soldiers led the cavalry and followed by the infantry. They attacked without restraint. Suddenly, the sound of drums shook the heavens from all directions. 4 groups of troops and horses charged out together: Zhang Liao from the east, Zhang Xiu from the west, Han Meng from the south, Gao Lan from the north. Each group of troops was shouting to capture Ma Chao alive. With Yu Jin's large shield soldiers blocking the way, the Western Liang soldiers could not take down the Ice City barracks in a hurry. Being attacked from the front and back, the Xiliang troops were in a mess. Spiritual Realms rules prompt: your plan, ambush from all sides, succeeded. The morale of the Xiliang army decreased by 20 points, average. Only now did Ma Chao realize that he had fallen into a trap. Just as he was about to turn his horse around, Su Huang once again rushed over to intercept and kill him. Ma Chao fought with all his might, but Bai Xiaowen had already arranged for Lu Jin, Han Qiong, Lu Kuang and Lu Xiang to participate in the siege. Even if Ma Chao had 3 heads and 6 arms, he would not be able to defend himself against so many generals. Pound brandished his broadsword and killed all the soldiers blocking his way. He rushed over to help Ma Chao. Only then did Ma Chao find an opening. He made a feint and turned his horse to leave. At the same time, he gathered the cavalry around him and launched a charge, trying to leave the battlefield. The direction that Ma Chao chose to escape was not blocked by Yu Jin's large shield soldiers. With the buff from charge formation, Ma Chao was the first to break out of the encirclement. Behind him was a group of Xiliang cavalry. Their bodies were covered in a crimson-red glow, forming a vanguard formation. Behind them, the Xiliang cavalry and infantry followed and finally broke out of the encirclement. Bai Xiaowen led his troops to chase after them. They chased them all the way to the main camp of the Xiliang army before retreating. This time, the Xiliang army had failed and lost 10,000 men. Although they did not suffer any serious injuries, they had lost the spirit they had when they started the war in the name of avenging their father. Their morale was quite low. Only Ma Chao, who had the charge formation skill, was able to fight his way out of the encirclement. If it was anyone else, they would have lost more than 10,000 men. Ma Chao is really strong. He actually managed to escape from such a good opportunity. In Bai Xiaowen's camp, Su Huang, who was bandaging his wounds, said. Su Huang's wounds were mostly scratches and were not serious. With his lord-level physique, he would be able to recover in a few hours after bandaging and stopping the bleeding. The other generals nodded and switched roles with Ma Chao. In today's battle, it would be hard for them to escape. Sun Yu said, Ma Chao is just a brute. Today's battle has already destroyed the spirit of the Xiliang army. Lord's plan should be carried out quickly. Bai Xiaowen smiled, let's wait for Ma Chao's reinforcements to arrive first. He immediately rewarded the generals who had contributed and promoted Su Huang to the position of West Conquering General. Ma Chao's camp. Ma Chao was hit by 2 arrows and had scratches on his arms. The medical officer was bandaging them for him. Today's situation is really dangerous. Pound shook his head. Yuan Shi was actually able to dig up sand and build a camp in one night. This is really unbelievable. Ma Chao snorted, that bastard Yuan knows a lot of demonic arts. Zhang Jiao was killed by him. What's so strange about that? The morale of the generals in the camp was low. Suddenly, someone reported that Han Sui had brought 20,000 soldiers to help. The Xiliang Chan army had also sent 20,000 soldiers. They were on the way and would arrive the next day. Ma Chao was overjoyed. He stood up and said, our army failed this time because we were weaker than that bastard Yuan. Now that we have 40,000 new soldiers, we can definitely defeat him. He immediately went out of the camp to welcome Han Sui. Han Sui saw the bloodstains on Ma Chao's clothes and said in surprise, nephew, I haven't seen you for a few days. What happened? Ma Chao then told Ji Hao about what had happened in the past couple of days, including Yuan Shi crossing the Puban city at night, building the ice city overnight, and ambushing Ji Hao's army for a while. Han Sui looked at the 20,000 soldiers he had brought with him and said in a low voice, although Yuan Shi is young, he is extremely intelligent and has the support of Dao. Nephew, do you want to consider mending the relationship between the two families? After all, he might not be responsible for the death of my sworn brother. Ma Chao was enraged. Uncle, why do you say that? Are you afraid of Yuan Shi's army and want to go against your father's alliance? Han Sui quickly said, I just don't want my sworn brother's faction to be cut off. Meng Qi, don't doubt me. Ma Chao's expression became better. He led Han Sui into the camp and set up a banquet to welcome him. That night, in Han Sui's camp, Han Qi, who was also known as Camille, told Han Sui in detail about the battle over the past few days. Han Sui's worry couldn't be wiped away. Camille said, today, I saw how Ma Chao treated father. He didn't respect you at all. Father, why do you keep tolerating him? Han Sui sighed. His father and I are sworn brothers. How can I bear to abandon him? Camille said, Father, do you think Ma Chao can defeat Yuan Shi even if he has 40,000 new soldiers? Without waiting for Han Sui to reply, Camille continued. I investigated. Ever since Yuan Shi started to attack Yuzhou, he single-handedly conquered Liaodong and destroyed Zhang Jiao. He traveled 1,000 miles and went deep into enemy territory. He broke into Shudu and returned with the emperor and officials. He treated the Chao army like nothing. Later on, Yuan Shao died in battle, and he took over the throne. Within a few days, he seized the military power of 2 of his brothers and stabilized Hebei. When Cao Cao invaded again, he suffered heavy losses. He fled south in panic and finally died in Chanyuan. Father, Yuan Shi's strategic ability is much stronger than Ma Chao's. He also has many civil servants and generals under him. Ma Chao is stubborn and wants to use Xiliang to go against the Zhongyuan army. He is just dreaming in a mantis trying to stop a chariot. He will be defeated sooner or later. Why do you want to bet the lives of our entire family on him? Camille had prepared this speech for a long time. What she said was the truth and was quite convincing. Han Sui kept silent. Camille took out a letter and passed it to Han Sui. Yuan Shi sent someone to secretly send a letter to me. Father, do you want to take a look? Chapter 13:12. Han Sui was shocked. How are you able to exchange letters with Yuan Shi? Speaking of this, Han Sui seemed to have realized something. He looked at his daughter carefully and said, I remember that you once went to Yedu. Could it be that you like Yuan Shi? Camille lowered her head and said, I saw Yuan Shi in Yedu. Only then did I know what a real man is. For someone like Ma Chao who is bold but not astute, Grand Marshal Yuan is 10 times better than him. Han Sui glanced at Camille in confusion. Girl, when did you become so bold? Marriage needs the parents' orders and matchmakers' words. How can you decide on your own? Camille felt that she had misspoken, so she could only lower her head and admit her mistake. In fact, this was also caused by the difference in cultural background. If an awakened person from the Huaxia knew about the marriage customs of the ancient Huaxia and the shyness of the ancient Huaxia women, they wouldn't speak like Camille and arouse her father's suspicion. Many foreigners who came to the ancient Huaxia didn't do well mainly because they didn't understand the ancient Huaxia's cultural background and implicit way of speaking. They often aroused suspicion in their words and even inadvertently offended the natives of the spirit realm without them knowing. Fortunately, Miss Han Chi was a Western Liang woman and not a girl from the Central Plains. In terms of marriage, it wasn't particularly strange for her to be braver. Han Sui opened Bai Xiaowen's letter and skimmed through it. Fortunately, there's no military affairs written here. It's just a casual chat. Camille said, I know the importance of this matter. Of course, I won't reveal our military's secrets. She silently added 2 words in her heart, as if. Han Sui then asked, Is Yuan Shi interested in you? A young hero like him who had achieved success at such a young age and had the power to overturn the world might not fancy a Western Liang girl like you. Camille smiled and said, Father, look at the back. Han Sui turned the letter over and saw the poem Guanju written on it. It said that a gentleman longed for a fair and graceful woman when he saw one. Han Sui was both happy and worried. He said, unexpectedly, Yuan Shi is really interested in you. This is indeed rare. There were tens of thousands of women in the Central Plains. What kind of woman could he not have? He didn't even take a fancy to Ma Yunlu, yet he took a fancy to a silly little girl like you. How strange. Camille puffed out her chest and said angrily, Father, you're underestimating me. I'm not inferior to Miss Ma Yunlu in any way, right? Han Sui turned his head away from Camille and reprimanded her with a frown, Girl, you're too rude. Camille didn't know which ancient Huaxia taboo she had committed. She could only follow her past experience and bow her head in remorse. Han Sui then sighed, with this relationship, when the Western Liang army falls, if our family becomes a prisoner, at least we can keep our lives. Camille said, Father, since you know that Ma Chao will lose, why should you hang yourself on him? It would be better to secretly reply to the letter, set things right, and cooperate with Yuan Shi to capture Ma Chao. Not only did Father not have to be a prisoner, he could even be Yuan Shi's guest of honor. When the time comes, the Marquis of Western Liang's seat will be Father's. Han Sui didn't have the energy to reprimand his cheap daughter for not knowing when to back down. He shook his head and sighed, Ma Teng and I are sworn brothers. How can we go back on our words? Don't mention the matter of cooperating with the enemy. Camille blinked, then should I write a reply? Han Sui nodded and said, as long as it's not a military matter, you can write it. But you have to be careful. If someone finds out, it won't look good on Father. Han Sui was actually very conflicted in his heart. He knew that there was no future in fighting against Yuan Shi with Ma Chao, but he couldn't bear to stab Ma Chao in the back. His daughter maintaining a personal friendship with Yuan Shi was also a way out. Camille asked, Father, what should I write to respond to Yuan Shi's feelings? Han Sui had read books before, so he immediately said, Yuan Shi used Guanju, which is from the Book of Songs, Guofeng. It's very elegant. If you have feelings for him, you can write Jimu as a reply. Camille said, I won't. Han Sui, the messenger sent by Camille, was either unlucky or fated to be captured by Ma Chao's patrolling soldiers as a spy. They found the letter and presented it to Ma Chao. Ma Chao was very suspicious when he saw that the letter was sent from Han Sui's camp. He opened the letter and read it. The content of the letter was nothing more than trivial matters about life and didn't involve military matters. At the end, it was signed by Han Chi. Ma Chao frowned, feeling very unhappy. However, when he flipped to the back, he saw a few short lines, Nan as Ji Mu, Guing Ying. If a gentleman is happy, fortune will follow him. Nan as Ji Mu, Guing Ying. If a gentleman is happy, fortune will follow him. Nan as Ji Mu, Guing Ying. If a gentleman is happy, fortune will follow him. When Ma Chao saw this Ji Mu, he said angrily, I'm fighting to the death with Yuan Shi, but you're still in the mood to talk about marriage. Ma Tai didn't understand the meaning of this, so he asked for some clues. Military Secretary Zhou Fu said, this article is called Ji Mu, and it comes from the Book of Songs, National Wind. It repeats 3 sentences, and it talks about how Silo relies on Xiao Mu and yearns for the benevolence and kindness of a gentleman. Governor Han's daughter wrote such a letter to Yuan Shi, so she probably already has someone in her heart. Ma Chao was filled with anger, so he took the letter and wanted to go to Han Sui's camp to denounce him. Pound and Ma Dai hurriedly dissuaded him, you can't. If Han Sui doesn't have the intention to join Yuan Shi, it won't be good for young general to go. If Han Sui has the intention to join Yuan Shi, won't young general be walking into a trap? Ma Chao's anger subsided slightly. After thinking about it, he ordered someone to invite Han Sui. Han Sui still didn't know that his daughter's letter was exposed. When he heard Ma Chao's invitation for a banquet, he was about to leave. In the end, Camille couldn't bear it and persuaded, Father, Ma Chao has always been proud of his bravery and doesn't take you seriously. Now that he suddenly invited you to a banquet, I'm afraid he doesn't have good intentions. Han Sui shook his head and said, you've really been bewitched by Yuan Shi, so you don't know what's going on. That's why you don't like Ma Chao. Ma Chao is my adopted nephew. How could he have bad intentions when he invited me to a banquet? He immediately tidied up his clothes and went to the banquet. At the banquet, Ma Chao urged Han Sui to drink. After 3 rounds of wine, Ma Chao asked, now that the reinforcements have arrived, does Uncle have a plan to defeat Yuan Shi? Hearing this, Han Sui thought that he had found another opportunity. He advised, nephew, don't be too stubborn. With the power of the Central Plains, even if it's a moderate ruler, our Western Liang can't resist. What's more, Yuan Shi is a man of great talent and strategy. Since the start of the war in Yuzhou, he has been victorious in every battle. Why don't we write a letter to make peace? Ma Chao's expression changed. He sneered and said, Uncle naturally wants to make peace. If I don't want to make peace, will Uncle send someone to capture me? Han Sui was shocked. Nephew, why do you say that? Ma Chao stood up and threw a letter in front of Han Sui. He shouted, you want to take my head and use it as your daughter's dowry. You're still pretending that you don't know? Chapter 13:13. When Han Sui saw that the letter had been leaked, he felt ashamed. His daughter Han Chi had exchanged letters with Yuan Shi. This was Han Sui's escape route. However, now that Ma Chao had exposed it, he could not explain himself. Han Sui could only say, in the letter, my daughter did not reveal any military information. She also did not collude with Yuan Shi. I did not betray the alliance. Ma Chao scoffed, this letter did not mention any military information. What about the other letters? Han Sui insisted that there was only this one letter. Ma Chao was furious. He pulled out his sword and wanted to kill Han Sui. Pang De hugged Ma Chao's arm and advised, the main force of the Xiliang army is the young general and Governor Han. If we kill Governor Han, his subordinates will definitely cause internal strife. What can we use to resist Yuan Shi? Ma Dai also hurriedly advised, Han Sui is the uncle. We are the younger generation. If we kill the uncle, it will go against filial piety. Ma Chao suppressed his anger and said, if we keep this old thief, he will probably join Yuan Shi in the blink of an eye. Ma Dai said, why don't we temporarily detain Han Sui in the camp and not let the news leak? Then, We can use his name to send our trusted subordinates to seize his military power. Ma Chao listened to Ma Dai's plan and ordered his trusted subordinates to detain Han Sui in secret. Then, they found a small seal that Han Sui carried with him and forged an order to send his trusted subordinates to seize power in Han Sui's camp. Until nightfall, there was still no news from Han Sui's camp. Ma Chao was anxious. He sent scouts to gather information, but none of them returned. Suddenly, there was a report that the camp was on fire. A fire in the camp was a big deal. Ma Chao hurriedly brought people to inspect the camp. When he saw that the fire was small, he ordered the soldiers to extinguish it. Fortunately, it did not cause a big disaster. Unexpectedly, when Ma Chao arrived at the camp, he heard a series of reports. An assassin had broken into the camp, killed the guards, and rescued Han Sui. Ma Chao was shocked. He hurriedly got on his horse and led his men back. When he returned to the camp, he heard chaos. Two groups of soldiers were fighting each other. They were all wearing the Shiliang army's armor. A few generals protected Han Sui as they fought and retreated. Ma Chao recognized that one of them was his sworn sister, Han Chi. He shouted, "Han Chi! You really want to rebel?" Han Chi, also known as Camille, spat when she saw Ma Chao. "You're not the emperor. My father was imprisoned by you, and you won't allow me to save him? You're a junior, yet you're imprisoning your uncle. That's disgraceful." Ma Chao angrily said, "If you did not betray our alliance, how could I be like this?" Immediately he shouted his order. The elite soldiers stepped forward. Not a single one was allowed to leave. Camille's weapons were 2 pistols. Under the transformation of the spirit realm's rules, they were 2 crossbows, and it was unknown how the crossbows were automatically loaded. She held the gun with both hands, held it horizontally, and fired continuously. After the bullets hit the Shiliang army under Ma Chao's command, although the damage was average, they were randomly inflicted with rather troublesome negative statuses such as confusion, speed reduction, dizziness, bleeding, and so on. The generals by Camille's side also had their own unique abilities. One of them was a burly general with a slightly tanned face. He held a large shield and a wrench in his hands, and his defense was tight. The waves of attacks from the Shiliang army under Ma Chao's command were all blocked by him. When a leader-level general swung his sword at him, a yellow light flashed on the surface of this general's body, and he swung his shield horizontally. This general's blade was retracted, and he was sent flying like a fly. There was also a slim female general. She held 2 swords in her hands, and her figure was like a ghost. Every time she swung her sword, an ordinary Shiliang army soldier would fall. Ma Chao felt that these 2 people were somewhat familiar, but he was sure that they were not the generals under Han Sui. Beside him, the military secretary Zhou Fu said, "Young general, these 2 people are Yuan Shi's generals. The one with the shield is called Han Yang, and he's brave. The one with the 2 swords is called Li Shu, and she's also not to be underestimated." Ma Chao was furious. "Han Sui, you colluded with the Yuan army, what else do you have to say?" At this time, Han Sui had already shed all pretenses of cordiality. He pointed at Ma Chao and said, "I didn't collude with them, but you've gone too far. You imprisoned me and even forged my military orders, trying to plot against my troops. Since you're so heartless, don't blame me for being unjust." Ma Chao gritted his teeth. Seeing that the crowd in front of him was congested, he couldn't use his spear, so he dismounted from his horse and walked. He drew his sword from his waist and charged in. At this time, Han Su was in the state of being buffed by his aura shield. He raised his shield to meet Ma Chao. Ma Chao's swordsmanship was good. In the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms, he wielded his sword and fought against 5 generals under Han Sui. The result was that he cut down 2 of them, and the other 3 fled. However, compared to Ma Chao, who was armed with a spear and was buffed by the prairie fire spear technique, his attack power was still much weaker. Han Su raised his shield to block Ma Chao. His feet were firm, and he stood firmly in place. After activating the shields, Iron Will, Skill and the Sandalwood Great Armors, Solid Wall, Skill, Ma Chao, as a powerful lord, couldn't take down an elite awakened for the time being. A trusted aide came to report, "Young general, it's not good. The granary is on fire." Ma Chao's heart tightened. Suddenly, he heard the sound of drums from all directions. Fire arrows covered the sky and landed on the yurt. The fire quickly spread. War cries rose from all directions. One after another, scouts came to report that the enemy was attacking from all directions. 3 of them were the Yuan army, and the other was the army under Han Sui's tent. They all had white scarves wrapped around their arms as a mark. It turned out that Ma Chao had sent his trusted aides to seize Han Sui's military power, but they were all killed by Camille. As for the news of Han Sui's imprisonment, of course, it couldn't be hidden. Therefore, Han Sui's subordinates were all agitated. Camille also had a reason to formally unite with Bai Xiaowen under the banner of saving her father. This banner of righteousness was still very important. Otherwise, betraying Ma Chao for no reason would inevitably be looked down upon in the Three Kingdoms plane where filial piety was the main theme. Originally, Bai Xiaowen's plan was to sacrifice Han Sui, but Camille didn't want to do so. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen slightly changed the plan. He sent Li Shi and Han Su to cooperate with Camille to rescue Han Sui from Ma Chao's camp. There were benefits to doing so. Firstly, Han Sui was still useful alive. Secondly, Camille and the other 2 could lead elite soldiers to infiltrate Ma Chao's camp and create chaos. This would allow Bai Xiaowen's army to defeat Ma Chao more easily. When Ma Chao heard that Yuan Shi's army was coming and saw that he couldn't defeat Han Su, he gave up on Han Su and turned around to gather his troops to face the enemy. Han Su didn't chase after him, or rather, he didn't dare to chase after him. This was because the duration of his special technique and other equipment's additional skills was almost over. If they continued to fight, they would definitely be exposed. However, the Western Liang army was currently having internal strife. When the military order was given, their reaction speed was much slower than normal. The 4 armies broke through Ma Chao's camp. Ma Dai shouted, "Big brother! This matter can't be done. Let's retreat to Chang'an first and plan our next move." Ma Chao glanced at Han Sui and Han Qi again. He gritted his teeth and said, "Retreat." He led Pound, Ma Dai, and a few hundred of his personal cavalry to open up a bloody path and escape. Chapter 13-14. Shiliang Army Camp. After Ma Chao, Pound, and Ma Dai left, the Shiliang army was leaderless. Han Sui's role was revealed. Cammy whispered to Han Sui for a while. Han Sui then shouted, "Listen up, Decima has ordered that those who surrender will be spared from death. Now that Ma Chao has escaped, if you don't put down your weapons, are you waiting to be killed by the Imperial Army?" Li Shi unfurled a white flag and said, "I am Decima's general, Li Shi. Those who kneel under the white flag will be spared from punishment and will not be killed. After 3 rounds of drums, those who refuse to put down their weapons and resist will be killed." The Yuan army arrived from all directions and surrounded Ma Chao's camp. Han Sui's troops listened to Han Sui's orders and immediately put down their weapons. Ma Chao's troops had lost their will to fight, not to mention that their general had escaped. They put down their weapons and knelt in front of the white flag. Han Su, Li Shi, and Cammy were busy gathering the surrendered Shiliang soldiers. Han Sui asked, "Yuan, where's Decima? Why didn't he show up?" He was a little uneasy. Although he knew that his life was not in danger, he did not know what Yuan Shi would do to him. Li Shi replied, "My lord set up an ambush to intercept Ma Chao. My lord has said that Ma Chao has the heart of the Chang people and cannot be allowed to return to Shiliang. Otherwise, he will be in big trouble in a few years." Han Sui was shocked, and he admired Yuan Shi's strategy even more. He took 1 step and looked at 3 steps ahead. The battlefield was like a chess game, and everything was under his control. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the northeast of the camp. Someone reported that they had captured Ma Chao's 3rd brother, Ma Tai. Li Shi ordered the soldiers to tie up Ma Tai and wait for Bai Xiaowen to return before dealing with him. Ma Chao led Pound, Ma Dai, and a few hundred remaining soldiers toward Chang'an. When they passed by Jing County, they were stopped by the Yuan army's generals, Zhang Liao and Han Meng, who fought for a while. Ma Chao only managed to escape after activating his overlord skill. He turned around and saw that there were less than 100 of them left. Fortunately, when they fled to Xinfeng, they encountered another group of deserters led by his younger sister, Ma Yunlu. Ma Chao finally felt a trace of warmth in the cold winter. After speaking with Ma Yunlu, he found out that his third brother, Ma Tai, had been captured by the Yuan army. Many of his trusted subordinates had been captured as well. As for the Chang army, they were not united. When Ma Chao lost, they led their own troops away. Although Ma Chao had suffered a great defeat, he was tenacious, or rather, stubborn. The walls of Chang'an are high and thick. My subordinate, Li Can, is there as well. With 5,000 troops, he should be able to hold the fort. The most important thing now is to recall the Chang soldiers to help me defend the city, and then we can discuss a plan to defeat Yuan. Ma Yunlu said, "Brother, we really can't beat Yuan Shi. Moreover, there are still some suspicious points about father's death. Why don't we send someone to write a letter to make peace first? We can discuss it again after the warm spring." Ma Chao just didn't listen and urged the remaining soldiers to go to Chang'an. Ma Yunlu was at his wits' end. When they arrived at Chang'an, Ma Chao called for the gate to be opened, and the guards on the city wall quickly lowered the drawbridge. The troops led by Ma Chao were already tired after traveling 200 miles. They didn't pay much attention and just rode into the city, hoping to have a good rest and a good night's sleep. However, after entering the Barbican, the inner gate was tightly shut. Pound hurriedly looked back and saw the drawbridge of the gate being raised. All of a sudden, Ma Chao and his remaining soldiers were like turtles in a jar. A drum sounded on the city wall, and countless archers stood up. They knocked their arrows and aimed at Ma Chao and the others within the Barbican. Bai Xiaowen stood on the city wall. Beside him were Su Huang, Han Qiong, and the other generals of the Yuan army. There were also a few faces that Ma Chao recognized, such as Ma Wan, Yang Qiu, and Liang Xing. They were all generals under Han Sui. Bai Xiaowen smiled, "Ma Chao, I've occupied this city for a long time. I've been waiting for you." Seeing Ma Wan and the others under Han Sui, how could Ma Chao not understand Bai Xiaowen's plan? He must have used Ma Wan and the others as the vanguard to trick the city gate into opening. Then, the Yuan army would swarm in and take control of the city. This couldn't be helped. After all, when Ma Chao imprisoned Han Sui, he had ordered a lockdown. Chang'an City was hundreds of miles away. How could Li Can know the details? He thought that Ma Wan and the others were his allies. Bai Xiaowen continued, "Ma Chao, do you see these 3,000 archers? With my order, all of you will die without a burial place." Ma Chao smiled bitterly, "Han Sui betrayed the alliance and I fell into your trap. It's fate that I can't avenge my father." Then, he pulled out the sword at his waist and was about to commit suicide. Pound and Ma Dai hurriedly went forward to hug Ma Chao. Ma Yunlu snatched Ma Chao's sword and cried, "Brother, are you really going to leave us behind?" Bai Xiaowen shouted, "Ma Chao. If I wanted to kill you, would I still be here with you, Luo Ho? I would have shot 10,000 arrows to take your life. The reason why I didn't give the order to shoot was to give you and me one last chance." Ma Chao raised his head and looked at Bai Xiaowen, "You want me to surrender? Don't even think about it." Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, "Not really. This is your last chance to resolve the misunderstanding between us. If you agree, I can walk down the city wall and talk to you face to face. What do you think?" Ma Chao's face was full of disbelief. Bai Xiaowen smiled and waved his hand. A white eagle flew down from the sky and landed in front of him. Bai Xiaowen stepped on the back of the white eagle and ordered it to slowly descend. Su Huang and the other generals were shocked and tried to dissuade him, "My lord, Ma Chao is as brave as Lu Bu. My lord's body is priceless. Why do you want to take such a risk?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Not really. I am magnanimous. I am not ashamed of the heavens and I am not condescending to anyone. If I kill Ma Chao, the world will believe that Ma Ting's death was caused by me. the truth will never be revealed. I believe that Ma Mingqi is a marquis and is not an unreasonable person. His words spread throughout the battlefield under the effect of his mental power. Seeing Bai Xiaowen step on the white eagle and float down, then walk toward them step by step, the remaining Shiliang soldiers were stunned. Ma Chao could not believe his eyes. Ma Yunlu did not know why, but a sour feeling welled up in her nose. Looking at Bai Xiaowen in front of her, her figure blurred for a moment and then became clear again. She repeated the same words over and over in her heart, "What is a hero?" This was what a true hero should be like. Ma Chao's face turned serious. He waved his hand and ordered the soldiers to spread out and surround the field in a ring. He, Pound, and Ma Dai dismounted from their horses to welcome Bai Xiaowen. The two of them were separated by about 5 meters. They bowed to each other and knelt on the ground. Ma Chao was the first to speak. "You are the knife and I am the fish. Under such circumstances, you are still willing to take such a risk. I am ashamed. However, if your words do not convey my meaning and cannot resolve my doubts, I will kill you and avenge my father even if I have to bear the infamy of being unjust." Bai Xiaowen smiled and nodded. "I am here to resolve the misunderstanding. If I cannot resolve the young general's doubts, I am willing to shed my blood." Chapter 13-15. Ma Chao said, "Please tell me." "I'm all ears." Bai Xiaowen asked, "When you fought Zhang Lu and Chang'an, did you know what I was doing?" Ma Chao said, "You were fighting Cao Cao." Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, "Cao Cao was much stronger than the Shiliang army. He was a terrifying opponent. Then, do you think I would have the energy to manage the affairs of the 3 auxiliary lands when I was thinking about how to defeat Cao Cao and unify Henan?" Ma Chao's expression changed slightly, but he didn't say anything. Bai Xiaowen continued, "The Shiliang generals didn't suspect me at first. They thought that Zhang Lu was the one who cursed old General Ma. That's why they brought old General Ma to Yedu for me to treat, right?" Ma Chao nodded. "Then why did you think I was the murderer?" Bai Xiaowen asked. Ma Chao was honest and said, "It was Imperial Uncle Liu Bei's strategist, Jian Yong, who came to me and told me all kinds of possibilities. He then told him what Jian Yong said that day without hiding anything." Bai Xiaowen laughed and said, No wonder, no wonder. I've heard that Jian Yong was Liu Bei's #1 strategist." Sure enough. Ma Chao stared at Bai Xiaowen and said, "Jian Yong said that my father would be in danger in Yedu. And the result was as Jian Yong expected. How do you explain this?" "Yes, Jian Yong's prediction was successful." His words were naturally very persuasive. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, "But, have you thought of another possibility?" "What?" Bai Xiaowen said word by word, "Jian Yong is the mastermind." This short sentence was like a bolt from the blue. It shattered Ma Chao's belief that it was true. He said hesitantly, "I've never heard of Jian Yong practicing Taoism." Bai Xiaowen said, "Jian Yong is only one of the masterminds. He's in charge of passing the message. The one who performed the praying technique is someone else. Let me analyze their plan. Listen carefully and see if there are any mistakes. First of all, when old General Ma is attacking Chang'an, use the first level of the spell. This layer of curse was not fatal for the time being. Then, when young General sent old General Ma to Yedu for treatment, he activated the second level of the curse and directly took old General Ma's life. At the same time, I sent the lobbyist, Jian Yong, to tell you this and this to plant a seed of doubt in your heart. When news of old General Ma's misfortune arrives, you will completely suspect me. However, there is still one more person on the list of suspects, and that is Zhang Lu. So, I guess Jian Yong must have gone to see Zhang Lu. Persuade him to write a letter to you and give up the fight for the Sanfu to prove his innocence. At the same time, he can avoid the calamity of war in Hanzhong. As such, I'm the only one left on the list of suspects. You will raise the Shiliang army and attack the imperial court. This way, the mastermind will have achieved his goal." Hearing Bai Xiaowen say so much in one breath, Ma Chao was shocked to the core. Even the generals of the Yuan army on the city wall were dumbfounded. Ma Chao closed his eyes and pondered, trying to find the loopholes in Bai Xiaowen's words. However, he had to admit that Bai Xiaowen's speculation was very reasonable and matched the development of the matter. After a long time, Ma Chao opened his eyes and stared at Bai Xiaowen. He said, "According to what you said, what is the mastermind's motive for doing this?" Bai Xiaowen said, "Our armies are at war. Naturally, I have no time to care about the south. Who will benefit the most from this?" Ma Chao's eyes widened. "You mean Liu Biao of Jingzhou?" "No, you mean Liu Bei." Bai Xiaowen sighed in his heart. "I'm sorry, Royal Uncle Liu. I'll have to trouble you to take the blame for a while." However, on the surface, Bai Xiaowen shook his head and denied it. Royal Uncle Liu Bei is known for his benevolence and righteousness. If his strategist, Jian Yong, didn't show up, I would never suspect him. Moreover, even if Jian Yong showed up, I felt that there was something fishy about this matter. It might not have been Liu Bei who ordered it. If Bai Xiaowen insisted that Liu Bei did it, Ma Chao might have doubted Liu Bei because of his benevolence and righteousness. However, Bai Xiaowen cleverly used reverse psychology to exonerate Liu Bei. This made Ma Chao somewhat disapprove of Liu Bei's benevolence and righteousness. Bai Xiaowen then said, "Actually, there is a clue that can help us find out the real culprit behind old General Ma's murder." As soon as he said this, Ma Dai, Ma Yinlu, and the others couldn't help but ask, "What clue?" Ma Chao glanced at the two of them. They knew that they had misspoken and took half a step back. Ma Chao then stared at Bai Xiaowen. "Why don't you tell me about it?" Bai Xiaowen said, "After thinking about it, the timing of Zhang Lu's letter is too coincidental. Next, I will send troops to Hanzhong and take over Dongchuan. If we can capture Zhang Lu and ask him if Jian Yong asked him to write a letter to you, we will probably be able to determine who the mastermind is." Ma Chao suddenly stood up. If it was really Jian Yong who persuaded Zhang Lu to write a letter, then the murderer is really Liu Bei. Bai Xiaowen said, "No matter what, Zhang Lu must be an insider. Next, young general can temporarily rest in Chang'an. I will lead troops to attack Hanzhong and capture Zhang Lu. After that, I will be able to clarify this matter." Ma Chao shook his head and said, "How can we let others do it if we want to track down the murderer of our father? This clue is really important. Thank you for dispelling my doubts. I will go to Hanzhong and capture the thief Zhang Lu." Ma Yinlu, who was at the side, said in a low voice, "Brother, our troops are all gone." Ma Chao was stunned. At this time, Ma Dai was full of admiration for Bai Xiaowen. He firmly believed that Bai Xiaowen was not the mastermind behind the scenes. He immediately said, "Brother, why don't you submit to Decima and ask to be the vanguard? Do you think Decima will be stingy with his troops?" Ma Chao shook his head and said seriously, "The clue is not confirmed yet. Decima is still suspicious. How can I submit directly?" Bai Xiaowen had already expected this. He smiled and said, "This is simple. Young general can submit to the imperial court and receive a title. Then you can borrow troops for me to attack Zhang Lu. I will lead the army to support you. What do you think?" Ma Chao was overjoyed. He said, "That's great. In fact, it was just a change of form." In fact, Ma Chao would still be Bai Xiaowen's vanguard to attack Hanzhong. However, in the Three Kingdoms plain world, this kind of formalism was very important. There was another substantial difference. If Ma Chao's generals, such as Pangda, Ma Dai, Ma Yinlu and so on, submitted to the imperial court, their lord would still be Ma Chao. If they submitted to Bai Xiaowen, their lord would be Bai Xiaowen. Ma Chao said seriously, "If Zhang Lu has never met Jian Yong, this clue is meaningless. I still cannot submit to Deacon Yuan. I will definitely find Liu Bei and ask him clearly." Bai Xiaowen said, "What if Jian Yong really did persuade Zhang Lu?" Ma Chao pointed to the sky and swore, "As long as I can confirm that Deacon Yuan is not the murderer of my father, I, Ma Chao, swear to the heavens that I will be loyal to you. If I violate this oath, I will die by the sword." Chapter 13-16. Actually, Ma Chao volunteering to attack Hanzhong was within Bai Xiaowen's expectations. Ma Chao was definitely worried that if Bai Xiaowen took down Hanzhong and asked Zhang Lu to give false testimony, then he could only allow Bai Xiaowen to lie to him. Hence, the best way was for Ma Chao to take down Hanzhong himself and capture Zhang Lu. Only then could he get the truth out of him. Although Bai Xiaowen had taken a risk to subdue Ma Chao, he would not be too lenient to Ma Chao. Moreover, Ma Chao had not wholeheartedly pledged allegiance to him. If he rewarded him heavily, not only would the surrendered generals of the Chao family not be convinced, even Ma Chao himself would inevitably become complacent. If he gave him an official now, when he officially submitted, what would he be given? Hence, Bai Xiaowen used the name of the imperial court to appoint Ma Chao as Chenglai general. As for his title, he still inherited his father's wily marquis position. There was nothing much to say about that. Including Chang'an, the 3 auxiliary lands, Guanzhong, would naturally return to the imperial court. However, at this moment, there were basically no civilians left in the 3 auxiliary lands. Most of them were moved to Xizhou. Bai Xiaowen was not in a rush to move the people back. Because there were no wars in Hanzhong, there were many refugees there, and the population was abundant. After taking down Hanzhong, he could move the people there to fill up Guanzhong. In history, Cao Cao did that. Although he did not talk about human rights, it had real effects. After winning, Ma Chao and the others needed to follow Bai Xiaowen back to the Yedu imperial court to meet the emperor and receive their rewards. Although Ma Chao wanted to immediately go and take down Zhang Lu, he was under Bai Xiaowen. If Bai Xiaowen did not give him troops, there was nothing he could do. Bai Xiaowen returned to Tong Pass and inspected the battle. Although he had lost close to 10,000 men, he had captured close to 20,000 of Ma Chao's soldiers who had surrendered. In addition, Han Sui had surrendered and had close to 30,000 men under his command. One could say that Bai Xiaowen did not use up any strength in this battle. Instead, he gained a lot from it. In terms of territory, not only did they take back the 3 auxiliary lands in Guanzhong, but they also expanded to Xiliang. The land north of the Yellow River belonged to the Yuan family. Even Cao Cao's land south of the Yellow River was under Bai Xiaowen's control. White Phoenix's small theater. What do you think Ma Chao is thinking? He was convinced by Jian Yang's words, and no one could persuade him. Li Shi spoke first. Bai Xiaowen said, on one hand, he wants revenge for his father. But on the other hand, Ma Chao also wanted to be like me, to control the world. He wanted to take advantage of my unstable footing to occupy the Central Plains. He is ambitious. Don't forget that Ma Chao was the leader of the last unification. Paused for a moment, Bai continued to fight. Actually, I didn't have to fight this war. There were no longer any civilians in Sanfu, so it was difficult for Ma Chao to gather rations. As long as Chao Ren guarded Tong Pass and depleted Ma Chao's rations, Ma Chao's morale would definitely drop after a month. If I write to him again, as today, setting out the advantages and disadvantages and dissecting the facts, he will probably withdraw. But Ma Chao would still refuse to submit to me, and Xiliang would still be hard to pacify. Considering that we have Camille as a spy, we might as well take advantage of the situation and pacify Xiliang. We can also complete the second main mission of unification. Our camp's strength will increase greatly, and we will gain a lot. Li Shi secretly curled her lips. It's indeed a bountiful harvest. According to Sister Sai, you acted cool and went down the city alone. When you met Ma Chao, Ma Yunlu was almost in tears. Now that you have beckoned her, she will probably come to you. I don't care about status or anything like that. Bai Xiaowen coughed. Am I that kind of person? Ma Yunlu and I are innocent. We have nothing to do with each other. Qiao Rui said leisurely, I don't know if you and Ma Yunlu are innocent, but there is solid evidence of you and Camille flirting and exchanging love letters. What Guanju, what Heimu? Cultured people really know how to play. Qiao Rui laughed, making people's hair stand on end. Bai Xiaowen was speechless. In the team's small theater, his teammates were all laughing. Even Han Su's face was dark. Bai Xiaowen rested and reorganized at Tongguan. Zhang Xiu asked. My lord once drew a strategy with the military counselor on the white silk. At that time, he saw the weakness of the Xiliang army and knew that he could defeat Ma Chao. I wonder what was written on the white silk. Bai Xiaowen ordered people to open the sealed white silk. On Sun Yu's white silk, there were 8 words: people's hearts are not united, orders are not consistent. Bai Xiaowen's white silk was even simpler. There were only 2 words: Sao discord. Bai Xiaowen laughed. Do you understand? I will pretend to increase the troops, and Ma Chao will certainly increase the troops. When the enemy's troops increase, the weakness of having different orders will be magnified. When the time comes, we will sow discord between Han and Ma Chao and defeat Ma Chao. All the generals were impressed. My lord and the military counselor, although the strategy and words are different, they lead to the same goal. Sun Yu was very perceptive and said, I also understood the weakness of the Xiliang army from my lord's deceptive strategy. Compared to my lord's wisdom, the difference is huge. Bai Xiaowen laughed. It was also the military counselor's plan. The generals worked hard to succeed. Thus, he gave the order to reward the 3 armies and promote meritorious officials. Zhang Xiu sighed. He was a little worried about Jia Su's future. After rewarding the generals, Bai Xiaowen saw Han Sui. Han Sui knelt on the ground and asked for forgiveness. Bai Xiaowen personally helped him up and said, Governor Han was able to repent at the last moment and set things right. What is your crime? I need someone to guard Xiliang. Governor is the most suitable person, and I will recommend you to be the Marquis of Xiliang and the Governor of Xiliang. Han Sui was delighted. He thought to himself, is my daughter Han Qi really so charming? Was he usually a little too strict with her? However, Bai Xiaowen did not mention Camille and said, Xiliang is cold and bitter. Governor can send your family to Yedu to enjoy a good life. When Han Sui heard that, he understood. For a general to have his family stay in the capital, this was an unspoken rule. He was the Marquis of Xiliang and the Governor of Xiliang, controlling the military and political power of Liangzhou. He did not fight for this territory himself. It was given to him by Bai Xiaowen in the name of the imperial court. Of course, he had to obey Bai Xiaowen and move his family to Yedu so that Bai Xiaowen would be at ease. Han Sui did not have much ambition and immediately agreed. However, Han Sui muttered in his heart, Yuan Shi did not mention anything about my daughter. Is he too shy to talk about it? However, when he saw Bai Xiaowen asking him to move his family to Yedu, he did not think so. With a stomach full of questions, Han Sui excused himself and sent Camille to ask Bai Xiaowen about it. Camille said, Captain Bai, we're sending love letters to each other for the sake of the unification of the country. Please don't misunderstand. Bai Xiaowen was slightly stunned, then he smiled. Of course not. Camille carefully looked at Bai Xiaowen's face. As an awakened, she could directly see Bai Xiaowen's real appearance. She was a little absent-minded for a moment. Then, Camille smiled and said, for a moment, I was really tempted. Fortunately, I don't like men. Bai Xiaowen was not surprised. Camille might look frivolous and seductive, but that was only her weapon. She did not let Bai Xiaowen take advantage of her. She did not have any romantic feelings for Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen's senses were very sharp, so he was very clear about this. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen had always treated Camille with a business-like attitude. If he really made that kind of request, Camille might agree to it out of desperation. However, this was not in line with Bai Xiaowen's way of doing things. If Camille refused, it would be even more awkward. Therefore, it was better to keep a distance. Chapter 13-17. In less than 10 days, Bai Xiaowen conquered Xiliang and captured Ma Chao alive. When the news spread back to Yedu, the officials of the Great Sima Manor were all delighted. On the other hand, the officials in the court were all in awe. Thus, Dong Zhao brought up the matter of awarding Bai Xiaowen the title of Duke of Yan and gave him many privileges. This was not a coincidence. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Dong Zhao was the first to suggest that Cao Cao should be given the title of Duke of Wei and added the title of Jiushi to show that he was different from the other officials. Now, he only mentioned the title of Duke and did not add the title of Duke of Wei. Apart from a few officials who lowered their heads and did not speak, most of the officials agreed. What needed to be said was that these officials were all captured by Bai Xiaowen from Shudu. Comparatively speaking, they were weaker. Those who were stubborn and did not want to move the capital were all killed by the emperor as Cao Cao's henchmen. Back then, Bai Xiaowen did not give the order himself and instead asked the emperor to kill the officials. Now, it was effective. It lowered the loyalty of the officials to the emperor, although their loyalty was not high to begin with. Only one official opposed this and took action. It was none other than the Minister of Imperial Affairs, Sun Yu. However, Sun Yu did not raise his opinion in the court. Instead, he wrote a letter to Bai Xiaowen and advised him not to do so. On the way back, Bai Xiaowen received Sun Yu's letter. After reading it, he sent it to a few of his teammates in the White Phoenix battle team for them to see. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Sun Yu advised Cao Cao to give himself the title of Duke of Wei. It is reasonable for him to advise you not to give yourself the title of Duke of Yan, Qiao Rui said. Li Shuyi said, when I read the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, I felt that Sun Yu was very strange. You said that he was loyal to the emperor, but when the emperor recognized Liu Bei as his uncle, he told Cao Cao to be careful. However, when you said that he was loyal to Cao Cao, he stopped Cao Cao from giving himself the title. He is a very contradictory person. Bai Xiaowen said, this is not strange. Sun Yu was not loyal to the emperor or Cao Cao. He was just an idealist. His dream was for Cao Cao to be Yin, Duke of Zhou. As one of Cao Cao's subordinates, his name could also go down in history. When there was a conflict between reality and ideals, he would not compromise, which led to the tragedy in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Cao Cao gave Sun Yu an empty food box, and Sun Yu committed suicide by taking poison. What are you going to do? Cao Cao was suspicious, Bai Xiaowen said. He thought that if Sun Yu did not help him, he would help the Han. I can't bear to kill Sun Yu, but I can't accommodate his will either. I've already done my research. Becoming an emperor is a great contribution to the unification of the world, so I can't give up on it. To proclaim oneself as an emperor, the titles of dukes and kings are necessary preludes. As for Sun Yu's letter, Bai Xiaowen's method was to treat it coldly. He used the delay tactic and ignored it. In addition, he sent an envoy to Yedu to reward Sun Yu with a pair of white jade pieces. Dong Zhao understood Bai Xiaowen's real intention. Naturally he contacted the officials to urge the emperor. When Bai Xiaowen returned to Yedu, the emperor sent out the imperial carriage and led the officials out of Yedu to welcome him. The imperial edict conferred Bai Xiaowen the title of Duke of Yan. He could enter the court without haste, without praising him, and without swords. The title of Yan was because Bai Xiaowen started his army from the land of Yuyan. The other three privileges had their own reasons. In ancient times, when the officials met the emperor, to show respect, they had to lower their heads and walk quickly into the court. This was called haste. Enter the court without haste meant that they did not need to walk quickly and could walk into the court. When meeting the emperor, there was a procedure. The master of ceremonies would call out, Minister of War, Governor of Ji Province, Yuan Shi, greets the emperor. He had to include his name. In ancient times, only when one of them was a superior or elder could this be done. Now, the imperial edict called without praising him meant that he did not have to use his name, but only his official position. Although it seemed like a small change, it reflected that the emperor and the officials were on equal footing. The last one, without swords, meant that he could wear shoes and carry a sword to meet the emperor. This was also a special privilege and honor. However, Bai Xiaowen naturally had to pay a certain price in order to enjoy such great power and influence. For example, the emperor and the officials had completely seen Bai Xiaowen's true colors. For example, Sun Yu had taken the initiative to resign. Bai Xiaowen could only meet Sun Yu. When he saw Sun Yu this time, Bai Xiaowen was shocked again. Compared to the last time they saw him, Sun Yu had lost a lot of weight. He looked like he was emaciated. "Your Highness, why have you lost so much weight?" Bai Xiaowen asked. Sun Yu replied, "I can't eat well and can't sleep well, so I've lost weight." Bai Xiaowen did not continue asking. He only sighed, "It's too tiring for you to take on so many roles. Since you want to resign, I will allow it. As for the Minister of War's position in the court, it is an idle position. There is no need for you to enter the court. I will promote you to the provincial governor of Ji Province. You can focus on the civil affairs of Ji Province." Bai Xiaowen did not overstep his boundaries by calling himself Gu. Sun Yu should indeed stay away from the center of the court and focus on local affairs. This was also a form of protection for him. When Sun Yu saw that Bai Xiaowen did not follow his pattern, he said directly, "Before you were conferred the title of Duke of Yan, I wrote a letter to you, but there was no reply." Bai Xiaowen nodded. "At that time, I was busy with the army and had already arrived in Yan province. There was no reply." Sun Yu bowed and said, "As the descendant of a Han official, you are the third duke for 4 generations. The imperial court has treated you with great kindness. You should be loyal and abide by the etiquette of retirement. A gentleman loves his wife with virtue. You should not overstep your boundaries. I sincerely request that you remove your title. The Han dynasty and the world will be fortunate." Bai Xiaowen coughed, "All right, Sun Yu, I understand. You may leave." After Sun Yu left, Bai Xiaowen submitted a memorial and asked to resign the title of Duke of Yan. A glimmer of hope appeared in the emperor's heart. During the court meeting, he asked, "Duke of Yan said that he is young and unvirtuous and does not dare to accept the title. What do you think?" The newly appointed minister of Guanglu, Minister Dong Zhao, went to the court and said, "This is Duke of Yan's humility. Your Majesty should issue another edict to not allow the Duke of Yan to resign so as to not disappoint the people." The ministers behind him bowed again and shouted, "Your Majesty, please issue an edict so as to not disappoint the people." It turned out that Dong Zhao had secretly colluded with most of the ministers. That was why there was such a scene. The emperor's expression changed. He could only issue another edict. This time, Bai Xiaowen did not decline and accepted it directly. Sun Yu could not do anything about it and could only lie in bed. Dong Zhao went to visit Sun Yu and said, "I heard that your son repeatedly advised you not to accept the title. If you were a jealous and harsh ruler, I'm afraid you would not be tolerated. My lord even appointed your son as the provincial governor of Ji Province. Why do you have to go against the trend and offend the world?" Sun Yu coughed and could not speak. He pointed at the door and stared at Dong Zhao. Dong Zhao sighed and said, "I received your son's recommendation. That was why I was able to meet a wise ruler and fulfill my ambitions. My advice was for the sake of your son's life. Since your son does not like it, I will not visit you again in the future to avoid dirtying your son's eyes." Chapter 13-18. Bai Xiaowen was given the title of Duke of Yan by the imperial court. He was appointed as a subordinate official and had connections with the court officials. Many court officials, such as Dong Zhao, also held positions in the duke's public house. No one said that this was against the system. Although Western Liang had been pacified, the second main mission of unification had not been completed. Bai Xiaowen sent Zhang He to lead the army to the north to conquer the bandits. The other members of the White Phoenix battle team also accompanied him to help his teammates gain some war contributions. However, Bai Xiaowen did not mention anything about attacking Zhang Lu in the past few days in Yadu. This made Ma Chao a little anxious. He sent people to ask many times, and finally came personally. Bai Xiaowen answered, "The imperial court's army has just gone through a big battle and needs to rest. The bandits and horse bandits in the north are swarming, and the border is unstable. It is not suitable to go to war. Moreover, Hanzhong's terrain is dangerous. We need to be prepared before we attack." Bai Xiaowen's reasons were reasonable. Ma Chao had no choice but to bow again and say, "I swear to find out who killed my father. I hope that the Duke of Yan can understand my situation and lend me some troops as soon as possible. Bai Xiaowen said seriously, of course I want to find out who the murderer is. Meng Qi, don't worry. I will lend you some troops to conquer Hanzhong in 10 days and a month. Ma Chao was overjoyed and thanked him. Bai Xiaowen said again, try to keep this news a secret. Do not leak it, in case Zhang Lu is prepared. Ma Chao agreed and left. Zhang Yi's first target was the Black Mountain bandit Zhang Yan. However, when he heard that Zhang Yi's army had arrived, Zhang Yan directly surrendered. Bai Xiaowen was not surprised when he heard this news. Zhang Yan in history was quite discerning. He was quite different from ordinary bandits. According to Bai Xiaowen's evaluation, he was a wise man submits to circumstances. Zhang Yan became a bandit during the Spirit Emperor's time. He gathered millions of people under his command. Of course, this was exaggerated. The extent of the exaggeration depended on Zhang Yan's ability to agitate people. The imperial court was unable to destroy the Spirit Emperor, so they could only let him do as he wished. However, Zhang Yan took the initiative to ask the imperial court to recruit him. Therefore, Emperor Ling appointed Zhang Yan as the commander of the disaster squads. She was in charge of public security and civil affairs in the mountainous areas north of the Yellow River. She even had the power to check on filial piety and honesty. He was like a provincial governor of a mountainous region, a bandit lord. Zhang Yan even had the qualifications to form an alliance with the various vassals during the period when the vassals were seeking Dongfeng. When Yuan Shao and Gongsun Zan were fighting over Jizhou, Zhang Yan jumped out and wanted to get a share of the action. He sent an army to help Gongsun Zan, but he was defeated by Yuan Shao. Later on, Yuan Shao went on a campaign against Zhang Yan. Although he did not pacify the situation, the Black Mountain bandit army suffered a lot of casualties. This probably destroyed Zhang Yan's confidence, allowing him to clearly see the gap between his motley crew and the armies of the feudal lords. In history, when Cao Cao pacified the Yuan family, Zhang Yan saw that Cao Cao was powerful and surrendered to him before he even attacked Zhang Yan. Thus, he was conferred the title of Marquis. Now, Bai Xiaowen's influence in the Three Kingdoms was even greater than Cao Cao's. It was not strange for Zhang Yan to surrender. Bai Xiaowen then sent Yedu officials to take over Zhang Yan's troops. After a final count, Zhang Yan had 100,000 men under him. Usually, when Zhang Yan boasted that he had 100,000 troops, he actually included all his subjects. Amongst which, the elderly, women, and children were all included. Bai Xiaowen gave Zhang Yan the title of in-country marquis, with 500 families living there. Under Zhang Yan, Bai Xiaowen selected a few thousand strong men and placed them into the army. The rest were all stripped of their armor and returned to their fields. Actually, they didn't have armor anyway, scattered and sent to Guangzhou, Xizhou, Bingzhou, and other places where people were sparsely populated. Bai Xiaowen also ordered the various prefectures to allocate land for these people to farm. He also gave out a series of good policies, such as exempting grain taxes for 2 years. The moment the decree was given, Zhang Yan's troops were all grateful and left with the old and the young. In truth, Bai Xiaowen basically could not see the benefits 2 years later. He did this because these people had just turned from bandits to people, and their hearts were not settled. If they did not have a way out, they would gather in the mountains and forests once more. Giving out good policies now could let their hearts settle down quickly. When the time came, even if Zhang Yan rebelled again, these former troops would not respond. Black Mountain Zhang Yan was already a thing of the past. Zhang Yan led the army across the border of Jizhou and Bingzhou to attack the Bingzhou horse bandits. Bai Xiaowen received a wave of Jingzhou messengers in Yedu. Jingzhou's Liu Biao had died from his injuries. His second son Liu Bei had inherited his father's business, but because he was young, his uncle Liu Bei was in charge of Jingzhou's military affairs. This Jingzhou messenger was sent by Liu Bei to ask for an imperial edict to make Liu Cong the Jingzhou magistrate. Although it was a request, it was actually a routine notification to the imperial court. Even if Bai Xiaowen did not agree, Jingzhou would not care. Bai Xiaowen squinted his eyes and asked the messenger, I heard that Lu Jingsheng had 2 sons, the eldest Lu Qi and the second Lu Kang. Why did you remove the elder and make the younger? The messenger replied, Duke of Yan, Lu Qi unfortunately died early. It has been a month. Bai Xiaowen was shocked. The time of Lu Qi's death happened to be the time he entered. This confirmed Bai Xiaowen's guess. When he was matched, the rules of the spiritual realm would pick out 2 spiritual realm characters who were about to die, or had just died, for him to choose from. This time, Bai Xiaowen had entered the realm of the 3 kingdoms, and the 2 spirit world figures who were about to die, but who were of noble and prominent status, should be Yuan Shi and Lu Qi. If Bai Xiaowen chose Lu Qi's identity, he would probably hear the news of Yuan Shi's death soon. As for Yuan Shi and Lu Qi dying earlier than in the romance of the 3 kingdoms, Bai Xiaowen did not find it strange. The appearance and departure times of the spiritual realm characters did not strictly match with the romance of the 3 kingdoms. Bai Xiaowen said, Lu Tsong is young and is not qualified to govern the prefecture. The imperial court intends to send another person of virtue and prestige to govern Jingxiang. The Jingzhou envoy replied, although my lord is young, he is intelligent and eager to learn. He also has the assistance of imperial uncle Liu Bei. If the imperial court chooses someone else to replace him, not only will it go against the old lord's will, but it will also make the people of Jingzhou unhappy. This is the source of disaster. Bai Xiaowen saw that this envoy answered fluently without any fear. He was curious and asked, Who is the envoy and what is your current position? That person replied, I am Hua Xian, also known as Ziyu. I am currently a subordinate of Lu Jingzhou. Bai Xiaowen's heart skipped a beat. This Hua Xian was not an ordinary person. She was even more ruthless than Dong Zhao in forcing the emperor to abdicate. In the romance of the 3 kingdoms, Hua Xian was the vanguard of Chao Wei's overthrow of Han. Bai Xiaowen wanted this kind of talent. He stood up and went down the stairs to recruit. I have heard of the great name of Hua Ziyu of the plains for a long time. With your talent and knowledge, why would you lower yourself to be an official in Jingzhou? Why don't you come to Yadu and display your knowledge? Hua Xian saw Bai Xiaowen's sincere attitude and bowed. Xian is willing to be the Duke of Yan's vanguard. Chapter 13-19. Bai Xiaowen was very confident in recruiting Hua Xian. After Hua Xian joined him, Bai Xiaowen was naturally overjoyed. He then appointed Hua Xian as the Minister of War and granted him the position of advisor. Hua Xian did not expect Bai Xiaowen to regard her so highly. Naturally, she expressed her gratitude. She thought to herself, Yuan Shi is so young and yet he is able to be so courteous. No wonder he is able to make such a name for himself. After being appointed, Hua Xian was one of them. Bai Xiaowen asked, You have been in Jingxiang and Jiangnan. You should know the situation there. I heard that there were frequent wars between Jingzhou and Jiangdong. Hua Xian replied. Since Liu Biao was defeated in Shudu, he was unable to recover. Jiangdong's Sun clan is indeed powerful. They gathered all the civil and military talents and took advantage of the situation to attack Jingzhou. In half a month, they occupied 5 counties in Jingxiang. Bai Xiaowen nodded. I have heard that Sun Tzu is the tiger of Jiangdong. He is as brave as Lu Bu. I wonder who are his subordinates. Hua Xin said, Among the scholars, there are Lu Su, Zhang Zhao, Zhang Hong and the others, all famous scholars of their time. Among the warriors, there are Taisher Ci, Sun Yi, Zhou Tai and the others, all brave and fierce generals. Zhou Yu is also skilled in both civil and military matters. He also recently subdued the Jin Fan bandit, Gan Ning. His army is even more majestic. Bai Xiaowen had heard of these names. However, the general called Sun Yi made Bai Xiaowen curious. What is the relationship between this Sun Yi and Sun Tzu? Hua Xian said. Sun Yi is the 3rd son of Changsha governor Sun Jian. He is Sun Tzu's 3rd brother. He is only 16 years old but he is already an adult. Sun Tzu loves him and often keeps him by his side. Bai Xiaowen secretly felt strange. However, he smiled and said, "What ability can a 16-year-old kid have?" Hua Xian said, "The Duke of Yan is not to be underestimated." Sun Yi's bravery was not inferior to Sun Tzu's. More than a month ago, some of his subordinates rebelled. During a banquet, Sun Yi got drunk and attempted to assassinate him. Sun Yi was stabbed several times, blood flowed everywhere, but he still acted as usual and killed all of the rebels. After that, Sun Yi also made great contributions when attacking Jing Xian. If it wasn't for Liu Bei's help, I'm afraid Liu Biao wouldn't even have a place to be buried when he died. Bai Xiaowen nodded. Then who's under Liu Bei? Hua Xin said, originally, Liu Bei's generals were stronger than the civil officials. Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Zhao Yun, they were all enemies. However, he also recruited talents like Su Shu and Zhuge Liang, and was like a fish in water. That Zhuge Liang was known as the Sleeping Dragon. If it wasn't for his strategy, I'm afraid he wouldn't have been able to protect the remaining few cities. Zhuge Liang's early appearance was already known when Bai Xiaowen cut into the Three Kingdoms plain. While feeling regretful, Bai Xiaowen also had an idea in his heart. It seems that Sun Yi, who works for Sun Tzu, should be a top-level hunter who cut in. According to the rules of the spirit realm, the real Sun Yi was probably hacked to death by his subordinates. Then, a top-level awakened took over the identity of the dead Sun Yi and killed the subordinate on the spot. And Liu Bei shouldn't have any powerful hunters under him. If there were powerful hunters, they would have stood out early, just like Sun Yi. Those hunters who hadn't stood out and were mentioned by Hua Xin certainly wouldn't affect the progress of Bai Xiaowen's unification. Bai Xiaowen asked again. Liu Biao's original subordinates, such as Kai Mao, Zhang Yun, and others, are they still there? Hua Xin didn't expect the dignified Duke Yan to be familiar with the people of Jing province. She carefully replied, Kai Mao has died in the battle with the Sun family. Zhang Yun is under Liu Bei's command, assisting in the training of the navy. In addition, there are Kuai Liang, Kuai Yu, and other strategists who still respect Liu Kang. Bai Xiaowen understood. No wonder Liu Bei was much better than in the novel. It turned out that his biggest stumbling block, the pillar of the Kai family, Kai Mao, was broken. Without Kai Mao, Lady Kai was a little widow. Of course, she couldn't do anything. Lu Tsong's life was also casually needed by Zhuge Liang. As for Liu Biao's old subordinates in Jingzhou, they were all killed or marginalized sooner or later. The best result was to submit to Liu Bei. Are Sun Tzu and Liu Bei still attacking each other? Bai Xiaowen asked the key point. Hua Xin shook her head. I heard that Zhuge Liang wrote a letter to Sun Tzu. The two families temporarily stopped fighting and made peace. At present, Liu Bei is protecting Lu Tsong and occupies 4 counties. The remaining 5 counties are in the hands of the Sun family. Bai Xiaowen smiled. It seems that both the Sun and Lu families are wary of me. Hua Xin said, Sun Tzu and Liu are afraid of the Duke of Yan's power, so they stopped fighting and made peace. If they attack Jiangnan, it will be difficult for them to break through. Bai Xiaowen nodded in agreement. For Hua Xin to say such words, it was enough to see that she was a knowledgeable person. Bai Xiaowen was not in a rush to attack Jiangnan. After all, in the novel, Cao Cao suffered a huge loss at the hands of the Sun Tzu and Liu Bei. This was why he was unable to unify the world. In Bai Xiaowen's opinion, it was better to take the 2 rivers first so that Liu Bei would not be able to occupy Sichuan. At that time, Bai Xiaowen would have 10 out of the 13 provinces. After accumulating enough strength, he would think of a way to wipe out Sun Tzu and Liu Bei. Hua Xin stayed in Yedu while Bai Xiaowen sent Hua Xin's deputy to bring the imperial edict back to Jingzhou. As for Lu Tsong's succession, Bai Xiaowen did not interfere. Instead, he happily made Lu Tsong the governor of Jingzhou. As for the request in the letter to make Liu Bei the Xianyang general and temporarily take charge of Jingzhou, Bai Xiaowen did not agree. Instead, he made Liu Bei the governor of Jiangxia. Currently, Jiangxia was Sun Tzu's territory. It was not hard to guess Bai Xiaowen's intentions by making him an official. Especially since the other side had Zhuge Liang, it was easy to see Bai Xiaowen's plan. However, this was an open scheme. I have the emperor in my hands, so I was happy to make him an official. You can do whatever you want. A few days later, news of victory spread back to Yedu. With the help of Li Shi, Cecilia, and the others, Zhang He defeated the Bing province horse gang. He killed 1,000 people and seized 400 good horses. Bai Xiaowen was delighted and rewarded Zhang He. However, there was one thing in Zhang He's report that caught Bai Xiaowen's attention. While clearing out the Bing province's mounted bandits, Zhang He discovered that the base of the mounted bandits was in Yunzhong County of Bing province. Yunzhong Prefecture was the territory of the Wu people. There were Xianbei, Wuan, and other Hu tribes there. Furthermore, only a small portion of the horse gang members were killed. Most of them were Wu people. From this, one could understand what was going on with the Bing province horse gang. If they could not deal a heavy blow to the Wu people, then the Bing province horse gang would rise from the ashes. Should the commander-in-chief personally lead the troops to solve the problem once and for all? After Bai Xiaowen thought about it, his reply was to order Zhang He to lead the victorious army to continue north. The grain would be provided by the Bing province governor. Chapter 1320. Even if the Bingzhou horse gang had nothing to do with the foreign tribes, Bai Xiaowen still had to find a reason to teach these Hu people a lesson. Because the Grand Unification main mission 2 had not been completed yet. What did this mean? It meant that Bai Xiaowen had not yet completed his strategic goal of consolidating the north. Zhang He had Xiao Rui, Cecilia, Li Shi, and Han Su for awakened teammates. They should not fail in their crusade against the Wu people in Xianbei. Zhang He's ability was enough. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he was a commander with both literary and military skills. Bai Xiaowen personally dispatched 30,000 troops to Yuzhou to conquer the Wuhuan. The Yuan family had always adopted a conciliatory policy towards the Wuhuan because Cao Cao was a great enemy in the south. Now that the Cao family had been conquered and the strength of the Yuan family's camp had greatly increased, how could they continue to implement the conciliatory policy? There was a saying, "Spit out what you ate from me." The Wuhuan had taken many benefits from the Yuan family's camp in the past few years, so they had to pay back double. This had nothing to do with loyalty. It was just the result of political and military strategic trade-offs. Even if the relationship between the Wuhuan and the Yuan family was good, Bai Xiaowen did not want to leave a hidden danger in Mabe when he went south. After all, his headquarters in Jizhou was too close to the Wuhuan and other foreign tribes. When Ma Chao heard that Bai Xiaowen was going to conquer the Wuhuan, he was anxious and came to the Grand Sima's residence to borrow troops. Bai Xiaowen said, "After I return from this expedition to the Wuhuan, I will definitely go to Hanzhong. That's why I set a deadline of 10 days to 1 month. Meng Qi, don't worry. Just wait patiently." Ma Chao said, "What's so difficult about the Wuhuan people? Do you need to trouble the Grand Sima to go personally? If you lend me 10,000 iron cavalry, it will take less than 10 days to bring the head of the Wuduan people to the front." Bai Xiaowen laughed and said, "There's no need to trouble Meng Qi. You just need to recuperate and study the terrain of Hanzhong." After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said again, "I'd like to borrow Pound." Ma Chao could not refuse to live under someone else's roof, so he nodded in agreement. Back at General Chenlia's mansion, Ma Chao met with Pound and asked, "Ling Ming, have you ever been in contact with the Duke of Yan?" Pang De scratched his head in confusion. "The Duke of Yan and I didn't even talk much." Ma Chao asked, "Then why did he specifically ask you to go with the army to the north?" Pound was even more puzzled. He shook his head and said, "I really don't know. If young general is suspicious, I'll just say I'm sick and won't go." Ma Dai, who was beside him, said, "No. We live under someone else's roof, we look up to Decima's nose like a baby in a palm. If Decima refuses to feed us, he will starve to death in an instant. Moreover, brother still needs to borrow soldiers from Decima, there's no need for you to do something so offensive." Ma Chao nodded and said, "I have already promised the Duke of Yan that he can follow the army to the north. However, you need to keep a low profile in the army and not show off too much. Pang De was silent for a moment before he nodded in agreement. Ma Chao's plan was not bad, but Bai Xiaowen's plan was not something Ma Chao could think of. Bai Xiaowen did not use the many fierce generals of the Yuan family in Yadu. He only took Pound and a group of unknown ordinary generals with the excuse of resting and reorganizing. On the first day of Pang De's service in Nasima's mansion, Bai Xiaowen hosted a banquet for him and gave him gold and silver robes. When they arrived at Yuzhou, Bai Xiaowen took his former subordinate, Yan Rou, with him. After some reorganization, they set off for the north. When the Wuhuan tribe heard the news, they were ready for battle. The Wuhuan army had 30,000 men, but it was said that they had 100,000 men. Bai Xiaowen sent Pound to take the lead. Pound thought to himself, although young general asked me to keep a low profile, if I lose the first battle, it will dampen the morale of our army. The Duke of Yan will not look good. He will also look down on the people of Shiliang. If I win the first battle, it won't be too late to keep a low profile after the army has gained the upper hand. Therefore, Pound pulled himself together and rode his horse, killing 3 deputy generals of the Wuhuan tribe. The morale of the Wuhuan army was greatly reduced. Bai Xiaowen ordered his men to beat the drums and march forward. The elite soldiers of the Yuan family had been eliminated twice, so the quality of the soldiers was not what it used to be. When the morale was high, the Wuhuan tribe could not resist the attack. They retreated 100 miles. Pound returned to the camp and knelt down. Bai Xiaowen personally helped him up. He stroked Pound's hand and said, "It is widely known in Shiliang that Ma Chao is the champion of the 3 armies. In today's battle, your bravery is not below that of Meng Qi. In my opinion, even the famous generals of the Central Plains are not as good as you." Since there were no generals of the Yuan family around, Bai Xiaowen boasted. The same boasting had different effects when it was said by different people. For example, if a kindergarten kid said, "You are so powerful," most people would just laugh it off. If a big boss patted the shoulder and said, "You did well, kid," most people would be flattered. Bai Xiaowen's position in the 3 kingdoms was much higher than that of a big boss. When he heard Bai Xiaowen comparing him to Ma Chao, Pound quickly thanked him. Bai Xiaowen praised, "You are not arrogant after winning. What a good general." He took off his robe and gave it to Ma Chao. He then ordered his men, "Bring the sword." Before Pound understood what was going on, he saw the Duke of Yan come over with a sword case. Bai Xiaowen opened the case and took out a high-end sword. He pulled out half of it and said to Pound, "General, do you know of this sword?" Pound saw the cold light of the blade and the 2 words Qingfu written in gold near the edge of the sword. He said, "Although I do not know of its origin, it must be a divine weapon." Bai Xiaowen laughed, "This is one of the 2 famous swords that Cao Cao ordered the craftsman to make. The other is called Etienne. It was always carried by Cao Cao. After I killed him, I took it for myself." This Qingfu sword was originally given to Cao Cao's subordinate, Xia Hoen. "Now, I give this Qingfu sword to you to help you make contributions on the battlefield." Pound quickly said, "I have not made any contributions. How would I dare to accept the Duke of Yan's sword?" The sword itself was very precious. However, what was even more precious was what it represented. It was a pair with Bai Xiaowen's Etienne sword. It represented a great honor. Bai Xiaowen said, "General, you killed 3 generals." Wu Huan was terrified. "Why did you say that you did not make any contributions? Can you bear to let this sword be covered in dust?" He forcefully handed the sword to Pound. Pound could only bow again and said, "I accept the Duke of Yan's kindness." After this gift of robe and sword, Bai Xiaowen set up a celebratory feast to celebrate the victory of the first battle. At night, a scholar came to Pound's tent. Pound looked and saw that it was Zhao Rong from Yuzhou. Zhao Rong was one of the first trusted aides that Bai Xiaowen took in after he started the war. He was in charge of Yuyan, the place where Bai Xiaowen started the war. His position was obviously different from the other officials. Pound did not dare to be careless and quickly led him into the tent. After asking for the reason, Zhao Rong did not beat around the bush and told Pound about Duke Yan's thirst for talent. Pound's heart was in a mess. However, he still shook his head and insisted, although I have received the Duke of Yan's kindness, I cannot bear to betray my old master. Please tell the Duke of Yan that the day that the young general surrenders to the Duke of Yan is the day that Pound will be loyal to the Duke of Yan. I will die 1,000 deaths without hesitation. Chapter 1321. After Bai Xiaowen received Zhao Rong's report, he smiled and said, "It's good that Pound didn't forget his old master. But since he said that, he's already half loyal." Immediately, Bai Xiaowen ordered his troops to attack Wuhuan. After Pound received the brocade robe and sword, he was even more motivated to die for his friends. He brandished his long saber in the military formation and killed the enemy generals. He was unstoppable. After studying the mountain river geographical map, Bai Xiaowen ordered Yan Rou to lead an army to the back of the Wuhuan army using the left and right flanking tactic. After Wuhuan was defeated, they were ambushed by Yan Rou and suffered a great loss. The leader, Jieduan Chanyu, sent people to ask for peace, saying that he was willing to return this year's annual reward. He asked the Duke of Yan and Decima to let him go on account of the friendship between the two families. Bai Xiaowen didn't agree to peace. He destroyed the letter and led the army to chase after them. That night, the moonlight was dim. A strange wind suddenly blew on the ground. Bai Xiaowen, who was looking at the map in the tent, was surprised. He put away the geographical map and asked with a smile, "That strange wind just now seemed a bit strange. Why don't you calculate it?" Gu Xian, who was in the tent, immediately calculated and said, "The wind blows the commander's flag, leading the enemy to raid the camp." From the geographical map, Bai Xiaowen had already noticed that the red dots represented by Jieduan and Prince Xian of the left were rushing toward the camp. This Jieduan is quite smart. He knew to send messengers to ask for peace and made me let my guard down. Then he raided the camp in the middle of the night. Bai Xiaowen commented. Gu Xian also said, "I thought the Hu people were uncivilized. I didn't expect them to be so smart. They're an anomaly." Bai Xiaowen then ordered the generals to gather in the tent and ordered them to do so. Jieduan Chanyu and Prince Xian of the left led their warriors into Bai Xiaowen's tent. But they didn't find anything. The camp was very quiet. There were only carriages and supplies, but no soldiers. Ku Dun cursed inwardly. Soon after, he heard the sound of drums and battle cries coming from all directions. The morale of the Wuhuan tribe plummeted. They lost their will to fight and fled in all directions. After Bai Xiaowen's 2 teams of ambushers killed the Wuhuan's army, another 2 teams of soldiers were waiting for the escaping Prince Xian of the left to capture him. Relying on the speed of his horse, he was lucky enough to escape. However, he could not return to his home because Bai Xiaowen had ordered Yan Rou to lead a team of light cavalry and rush to Wuhuan's camp. They would charge and kill everything in their way and burn Wuhuan's camp to the ground. This battle had completely scattered Wuhuan's vitality. He waved his hand and threw the sword down. Pound watched Ma Chao's back as he left. His anger rose and rushed to his head. He blacked out and fainted on the ground. Pound was really sick. Although people from the spiritual realm had better physiques than ordinary people, they would still fall sick when they needed to. Bai Xiaowen personally came to inspect and summon the famous doctor, Fan A, to treat Pound. Fan A reported that Pound's illness was due to the consolidation of depression. It would be difficult to recover quickly and he would need to rest for at least a month. Bai Xiaowen knew that Pound had fallen sick in the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms, but he did not expect him to fall sick now. However, now was a good time to buy people's hearts. Bai Xiaowen personally took the decoction that Fan A brewed and gave it to Pound. Pound, who was 8 feet tall, was moved to tears. How can this general be treated so well by the Duke of Yan? Bai Xiaowen smiled. It's easy to get 3 armies, but difficult to find a general. I'm partly responsible for your illness. If I didn't take you to conquer Wuhuan, you wouldn't have fallen ill. Ling Ming, if you have any requests, you can tell me. I'll try my best to fulfill them. After a moment of silence, Pound said, I hope the Duke of Yan can lend troops to young general as soon as possible to help him conquer Hanzhong and find out if Liu Bei was the one who killed the old general. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, of course. Not only will I lend troops to Meng Qi, but I'll also personally lead the troops to support him from behind and help him succeed. What do you think? Pound struggled to get off the bed and knelt down. Duke of Yan's kindness is something that Pound cannot repay even if I die 10,000 times. Ma Chao was right outside the door. He heard their conversation clearly. Hearing Pound's request, Ma Chao could not help but feel a little regretful. After Bai Xiaowen left, Ma Chao went to visit Pound. Unexpectedly, Pound's attitude towards Ma Chao was much calmer. Young general, once we capture Zhang Lu and find out that the person who murdered the old general has nothing to do with the Duke of Yan, I will return to the Duke of Yan's command and will no longer die for the Ma family. Chapter 1322. After news of Zhang San destroying Xianbei spread out, Bai Xiaowen received the notification that the Unification Quest 2, Consolidate the North, had been completed. Bai Xiaowen chose to submit the quest. Although this second unification quest was not as difficult as defeating Cao Cao, it took a longer time. Bai Xiaowen took 10 days to defeat Ma Chao. Following which, taking in Zhangyan and conquering the Wu people also took 10 days. In total, it had been close to a month. Although the unification process was going smoothly, and they had accumulated 40 days of free exploration time, Bai Xiaowen did not dare to slack off. After all, these two unification quests were quite special. Cao Cao was an ambitious person, and he knew that he had no chance of conquering the world. As such, he passed his ambition to Bai Xiaowen. This will save Bai Xiaowen a lot of time to clean up the mess, and he was able to consolidate his rule of Hunan in the shortest time possible. In the end, it only took 10 days. As for Ma Chao, he had Camille, a high-level spy, which was why he was able to defeat him so quickly. If such a special situation did not occur, the time taken to complete these two grand unification missions would not be less than 2 months. Bai Xiaowen once again gathered the civil servants and generals to set the country policy. Sun Yu was sick and did not participate. This was also a sign that Sun Yu was slowly distancing himself from Bai Xiaowen's ruling corps. Bai Xiaowen naturally cherished Sun Yu's talents. After Sun Yu fell sick, he invited a famous doctor to treat him. However, this was the best Bai Xiaowen could do. He couldn't change Sun Yu's mind and make him give him advice on how to proclaim himself king or emperor. Till now, Sun Yu's Wang's Lord skill was still working, and Bai Xiaowen was already thankful. During this meeting, the strategists had an argument about their next strategic goal. Some people said that they should first attack Jingzhou, then go down to Jiangnan, and then attack the east and west rivers. Sichuan is Yizhou, Dongchuan is Hanzhong. The reason was that Jingzhou's terrain was simple and easy to attack. Hanzhong and Yizhou's terrain was complicated, and the mountain paths were rugged. If they forcefully attacked, they would only get half the result. There was some truth to this saying. However, Tianfeng proposed the opposite opinion. There are 3 reasons why the Duke of Yan should take the 2 rivers first. Firstly, Sun Tzu of Jiangdong and Lu Tsong of Jingzhou have temporarily reconciled because they are afraid of our army going south. If our army attacks urgently, the Sun-Lu alliance will be quite troublesome. If our army attacks slowly, the Sun-Lu alliance will inevitably change. Secondly, when conquering an enemy country, the focus is not on whether the terrain is dangerous or whether the mountain path is rugged, but on whether the ruler of the enemy country is wise and whether the ruler and his subjects are of one mind. There is no need to mention Sun Tzu of Jiangdong, Lu Tsong of Jingzhou also as Liu Bei's assistants. They are all wise masters, from top to bottom they work together. As for Zhang Lu of Hanzhong, his army was small and his generals were few. Lu Zhang of Yizhou, even more so, was a weak and incompetent leader. Thirdly, the surrendered general, Ma Chao, sharpened his blade and thought about it day and night. He wanted to capture Hanzhong and punish Zhang Lu. Since the Duke of Yan has already made a promise, he cannot go back on his word. Moreover, if Ma Chao swallows Zhang Lu, regardless of whether our army wins or loses, we can reap the benefits. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, Sir Tian's words are truly logical. I have already decided to take the two rivers first before taking Jiangnan. After Bai Xiaowen said this, a notification from the Spiritual Realms Rule came, Grand Unification Main Storyline Mission 3, Greedy for Shu, activated. Mission Objective, obtain the actual ruling rights of Hanzhong and Yizhou. You have obtained 30 days of free exploration time. The actual ruling rights did not refer to the submission of the two rivers on the surface, but to the actual submission of Bai Xiaowen's empire. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes slightly. This Grand Unification Main Storyline Mission 3 was triggered so easily? No matter how he looked at it, Lu Zhang and Zhang Lu could not compare to the combination of Ma Chao, the Hu, and the bandits, nor could they compare to the Chao group. However, since it had been triggered, Bai Xiaowen did not think too much about it. He immediately gave the order to give Chenglai General Ma Chao 10,000 elite troops to be the vanguard. Ma Dai, Ma Xiao, Ma Tai, Ma Yinlu, and the other Ma family members would follow the vanguard. Bai Xiaowen led the army and made some preparations. 3 days later, he would personally set off. This time, Bai Xiaowen did not bring too many men, only 50,000 elite troops. He also sent Zhang Liao and Su Huang, 2 lord-rank generals, to lead the troops to defend Yuzhou and prevent Sun Lu from making any moves. Ma Chao had been placed on the bench by Bai Xiaowen, sitting on the cold bench for half a month. It could be said that he had been oppressed for a long time. Now that he finally had a chance to go on the field, he was naturally impatient. He ordered the troops to rush toward Hanzhong. When Zhang Lu of Hanzhong heard about the imperial court's expedition, he panicked and gathered his subordinates to discuss the matter. Under Zhang Lu, the civil servants were Yan Pu and Yang Song, while the generals were Yang Ang and Yang Ren. Their strength was average, and only Yang Ren was a rare leader-rank general. Apart from that, Zhang Lu also had a younger brother, Zhang Wei, who was also quite famous in Hanzhong. Many times, Zhang Lu had to consider Zhang Wei's opinion when making decisions. After hearing that Bai Xiaowen was honored by the imperial court as the Duke of Yan, that he did not enter the imperial court, did not have a good reputation, and did not have a sword in his hand, Zhang Lu was worried and thought about how to protect Hanzhong. After much consideration, Zhang Lu came up with the idea of establishing himself as the king of Hanning and vassals to fight against Bai Xiaowen. From this, it could be seen that Zhang Lu was a practical person. Did he really think that he could beat Bai Xiaowen just because he was a king and had a higher title than Bai Xiaowen? Before Zhang Lu could stand on his own, the civil and military officials under his command were startled. Yan Pu tried to persuade Zhang Lu to think of a way to swallow up Lu Zhang and take over the land of the two rivers before establishing himself as king. Zhang Lu felt that it made sense, so he temporarily shelved the idea of establishing himself. Lu Zhang of Yi Province and Zhang Lu had a grudge against each other. In terms of territory, Lu Zhang's territory was several times that of Zhang Lu's. The reason why he had not been able to take down Zhang Lu was because Lu Zhang was too weak, and the civil servants and generals under him were not on the same page. However, the relationship between the two families was still extremely bad. Whether it was for public or private reasons, Zhang Lu wanted to kill Lu Zhang. However, Yizhou was easy to defend and hard to attack. Furthermore, Zhang Lu's strength was not enough, so he was all bark and no bite. Before Zhang Lu could make any progress, new news came. The Duke of Yan, Yuan Shi, had pacified the Wuhuan tribes in the north, incorporated Zhang Yan, and completely consolidated the entire northern territory. He had also appointed the surrendered general, Ma Chao, as the vanguard to attack Hanzhong. Zhang Lu panicked and said, "Why don't we surrender?" Zhang Lu sent down his subordinates. Yan Pu was silent. Yang Song nodded and said, "I have long heard of the Duke of Yan's benevolence. He has always treated the surrendered generals well. My lord, with the strength of a county, going against the Duke of Yan's army is like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. It is better to surrender early, and perhaps you can still be conferred the title of Marquis." Zhang Wei scolded, "You can surrender, but my brother is the ruler of Hanzhong. After surrendering to Yuan Shi, how can he be tolerated? He will definitely be killed. Brother, don't worry. Hanzhong's terrain is very dangerous. I will bring Generals Yang Ang and Yang Ren to defend Yangping Pass. Even if Yuan Shi has 1,000,000 troops, he will not be able to fly over. Chapter 1323. Zhang Lu didn't have much of an idea, so after hearing Zhang Wei's words, he nodded in agreement. Zhang Wei brought Yang Ang, Yang Ren, and a bunch of Hanzhong generals to Yangping Pass. Zhang Lu was at the back to take care of the provisions. Yang Ren was very familiar with the terrain of Yangping Pass, so he suggested, "There's a mountain pass in front of Yangping Pass that is extremely dangerous. Why don't we set up a camp at the mountain pass? Not a single Yuan soldier can enter." Zhang Wei agreed and said, "I'll guard Yangping Pass. You two go to the mountain pass to prepare for battle." Yang Ang and Yang Ren accepted the order and left. Ma Chao was eager to take revenge, so he led 10,000 men and horses and traveled through the night into Hanzhong territory, heading toward the capital of Hanzhong, Nanjing. The scouts ahead reported that they were 40 miles away from Yangping Pass. Ma Dai advised, "Brother, don't be too hasty. We're already in Zhang Lu's territory, and the soldiers have already traveled for a day and 2 nights, so their bodies are tired. Why don't we set up camp and rest? When we have enough strength, it won't be too late to attack the pass." Ma Chao said, "I see Hanzhong as the top of my palm, Zhang Lu and the others are like chickens and dogs. During the Battle of Chang'an, Zhang Lu had a strong city and still couldn't beat us. Today, how can a mere pass stop me?" Ma Chao ordered the vanguard to dig a moat and set up camp 15 miles away from Yangping Pass. Unexpectedly, in the middle of the night, the camp suddenly caught fire. Ma Chao hurriedly got on his horse and led Ma Dai and the others to meet the enemy. It was Yang Ang and Yang Ren who had split up to attack the camp. With the camp on fire and the surprise attack, Ma Chao's morale was greatly reduced. Furthermore, Ma Chao's army had traveled through the night and was tired. The terrain in front of Yangping Pass was dangerous and not enough for the cavalry to show off their strengths. When the two sides clashed, even though Ma Chao was brave and killed 2 Hanzhong generals, he couldn't stop the collapse of the soldiers. Seeing that they were about to be surrounded by Zhang Lu's soldiers, Ma Chao didn't dare to fight and could only retreat with Ma Dai and Ma Yinlu. At daybreak, Zhang Lu's army finally retreated back to the mountain pass. Ma Chao inspected the soldiers. This time, their camp was raided and they lost more than 3,000 men. It could be said that they were at a disadvantage. And this was the result of Ma Chao fighting bravely, making Zhang Lu's army fearful. If it had been a commander with a lower martial strength, the situation would have been even worse. It would have been hard to say if they could even survive with 3,000 men. The loss of 3,000 men was secondary. However, the fact that their camp had been raided the moment they arrived caused the morale of the vanguard army to drop to 0. Pessimism pervaded the air. These vanguard troops originally belonged to the Yuan family. Although they weren't the most elite troops, they had fought all over the country and won many battles. When had they ever suffered such a loss under Bai Xiaowen? Ma Chao had always had his own unique method of boosting morale. He gave the order to rebuild the camp, and then led 500 cavalry to challenge Yang Ang and Yang Ren's camp at the mountain pass. However, Yang Ang and Yang Ren had experienced the Battle of Chang'an and last night's battle. They knew Ma Chao's bravery, so they avoided the battle. Every time Ma Chao led his troops to get close, they would be shot back by a rain of arrows. If he couldn't kill the general in front of the 2 armies, Ma Chao wouldn't be able to restore the morale of his troops. It would be even more impossible to get these 7,000 soldiers to attack the mountain pass. Ma Chao was worried, but there was nothing he could do. Ma Yinlu tried to persuade him, "Brother, don't worry. When the Duke of Yan's army arrives, there will be a good plan to break the pass." It would have been better if Ma Chao didn't hear this. After hearing it, he felt even more annoyed and stared at his hands in a daze. Ma Dai saw through Ma Chao's emotions and said, "Although our camp was raided, due to brother's bravery, we didn't suffer too much. Zhang Lu's losses that night weren't any less than ours. Since the enemy is avoiding the battle, we can send more spies to scout the area around Yangping Pass. After we draw a map, we can come up with a plan to break the enemy. Ma Chao nodded and accepted Ma Dai's suggestion. However, after a few days of drawing the map and studying it, Ma Chao realized that Yangping Pass was a dangerous place. It really had the feeling of one man holding the pass, 10,000 cannot break through. There was a small path, but it was hard to traverse. Even horses couldn't pass through it. Yan Ang and Yan Ren were Hanzhong generals and were more familiar with the terrain. They had already sent people to cut off the small path, so there was no way to sneak through. Ma Chao was at his wit's end. 3 days later, Bai Xiaowen's army arrived at Yangping Pass. Ma Chao went to meet Duke Yan Bai Xiaowen. When he was asked about the battle, his face was filled with shame. Ma Yunlu and Ma Dai both tried to find excuses for their brother. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, "The enemy army is defending, and it's hard to attack. This matter can't be blamed on Meng Qi." In truth, Bai Xiaowen had expected that Ma Chao would not be able to break through. Not to mention breaking through, it would already be good if he didn't lose. After all, the enemy was waiting for an exhausted enemy to break through. Ma Chao was eager for revenge and traveled day and night. The terrain in front of the pass was dangerous and not suitable for Ma Chao's Iron Cavalry commander style of fighting. Military advisor Sun Yu said, "General Cheng Lai, referring to Ma Chao, did you check out the geography of the mountains and rivers around here a few days ago?" Ma Chao ordered people to present the map. Sun Yu opened it and looked at it. After a while, Sun Yu raised his head and said, "Duke Yan, I have observed the terrain of Yangping Pass. It's not something that can be broken through with numbers. Duke Yan needs to be prepared for a long stalemate." Ma Chao felt better after hearing this. It turned out that Duke Yan's army also had no way. Bai Xiaowen said, "I have a plan to break through the camp. Once we break through the camp, Yangping Pass can be taken down. If we can kill Zhang Wei, Zhang Lu will definitely surrender and Hanzhong will be settled." Ma Chao was stunned, but the Yuan army's generals were all in high spirits. The haze of the vanguard's defeat was swept away. Ma Yunlu looked at Bai Xiaowen with eyes full of worship, but Bai Xiaowen acted as if he didn't see it. On the same day, Bai Xiaowen led a personal army to the pass to check the terrain. Unexpectedly, a drum sounded and an ambush was set up. Yan Ang and Yan Ren split into 2 groups to kill. Although they were suddenly ambushed, Bai Xiaowen's personal guards didn't panic at all. Chao Hongfei took the lead to resist Yan Ang, while Zhang Xiu resisted Yang Ren. Under Bai Xiaowen's command, Camille, Li Shi, and other friendly hunters worked together to attack Yang Ren and tried to kill him. However, the hundreds of personal soldiers around Yang Ren were not to be trifled with. Each of them was a master and protected Yang Ren. In addition, Yang Ren's ability was not weak. After fighting for a while, they both retreated. However, in this battle, they did not lose soldiers like Ma Chao. Instead, they killed a lot of Zhang Lu's soldiers. Yan Ang and Yan Ren tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. They returned to their turtle-like tactics and defended the pass. These 2 Hanzhong great generals are very brave when they need to fight, but they are also very calm when they shouldn't be fighting. They can be considered talented generals. Bai Xiaowen gave his evaluation. The next day, Bai Xiaowen took people to check the terrain in front of the camp. This time, Yang learned his lesson. He only sent his men to curse in front of the camp and did not fight. Chapter 1324. Bai Xiaowen only checked the terrain and did not rush the troops to attack the pass. Just like that, 2 days passed peacefully. On the 3rd day, Bai Xiaowen still brought troops to check out the stronghold. The generals did not understand what he meant. Ma Yunlu said, "The Duke of Yan looked the day before yesterday, and today again. Can we kill Aryang and take the pass?" Ma Dai quickly restrained his sister. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "If we raid the camp tonight, we will definitely win." Hence, he secretly sent out troops. Although the generals had received the military order, their faces were filled with disbelief. After all, the pass was too dangerous, and it was high up. It was not easy for the army to spread out. In such a narrow and dense terrain, Zhang Lu's army only needed to rain arrows to stop the Yuan army from advancing. What was the point of raiding the camp? Would Ariang be so stupid that he did not even arrange sentries? At 2:00 a.m., Bai Xiaowen ordered Han Qi, Camille, Li Shi, Qiao Rui, Han Su, and Cecilia to lead an elite squad to sneak toward Zhang Lu's camp. The other native generals did not think highly of this arrangement. Zhang He advised, Ariang is a talented general, so the defense of the camp will definitely be tight. If you want to send people in, it will be difficult to succeed. Instead, you will lose soldiers. Bai Xiaowen smiled, don't worry, I have already placed spies in Zhang Lu's camp. This operation will definitely succeed. Zhang He and the other generals did not believe him. At 3:00 a.m., Zhang Xiu and Zhang He followed Bai Xiaowen's orders and led an army toward the pass to assist the infiltrating team. When they arrived near the camp, they saw a sea of fire. Yangping Pass Zhang Lu's camp was already on fire. People shouted and horses neighed, and it was a mess. Zhang Xiu and Zhang He exchanged glances, and their eyes were filled with shock. When did the Duke of Yan prepare spies? Sure enough, it has unfathomable abilities. This was the same thought that ran through both of their minds at the same time. However, the two valiant generals did not hesitate and directly led their troops to attack the stronghold. Amidst the flames, Yang An was stabbed to death by Zhang Xiu's spear. Yang Ren abandoned his subordinates, flags, and supplies and fled. Bai Xiaowen led his troops straight into the mountain pass, advancing toward Yangping Pass. Zhang Wei, the general guarding Yangping Pass, saw Yang Ren running away alone and the pass being seized. He knew that he could not defend Yangping Pass, so he abandoned the pass and ran away that very night. Bai Xiaowen seized the opportunity to occupy Yangping Pass. The generals congratulated him one after another and asked him when he had prepared the spy. Bai Xiaowen only smiled and did not answer. In fact, Bai Xiaowen's observation of the terrain for the past 3 days was just a cover. He had already studied the terrain around Yangping Pass through the mountain river geographical map. He used the excuse of observing the terrain as an excuse, but in reality, he was looking for an opportunity to secretly use the bewitching talisman to control Zhang Lu. Although Zhang Lu was an elite, in front of the Taiping talisman, it was still difficult for him to fight back. However, Bai Xiaowen's luck was not good for the past 2 days. The captains he controlled were not in charge of night patrol. It was not until the 3rd day that Bai Xiaowen controlled a captain in charge of night patrol. Only then did he send Li Shi and his teammates to sneak in and set fire to create chaos. Then, Zhang He and Zhang Xiu, the 2 Lord-class valiant generals, led their troops to attack and seize the pass. Zhang Wei and Yang Ren lost Yangping Pass and returned to Nanjing to meet Zhang Lu. Zhang Lu reproachfully asked, "You said that Yangping Pass was an amazing place in Hanzhong, how come it was lost in less than 10 days? Zhang Wei said, "This time, it's because Yang Ang and Yang Ren lost the pass. There was no way to defend Yangping Pass, so we could only retreat." Zhang Lu, whose mind was filled with the doctrine of surrender, said, "Duke Yan's military is like a god. How can our army resist? It's better to surrender." Zhang Wei was still unconvinced. Nanjing City has been in business for 20 years. The city walls are high and thick, and the food reserves can last for 10 years. Why should we surrender? Maybe in a few months, the world will change and Yuan Shi's army will have no choice but to retreat. Zhang Wei was referring to Jingzhou and Yangzhou in the south. If the Sun and Lu families went north to Wancheng and Hefei, Bai Xiaowen would not be able to fight on 2 fronts. He would have to go back to help. Zhang Lu was persuaded again and agreed to defend Nanjing. Zhang Wei said, "According to Yang Ren, Yuan Shi is proficient in Taoist techniques. He seems to know a kind of bewitching technique that can control a soldier for his use. He can steal doors, set fires, assassinate, and so on. There's nothing he won't do. Brother, you have to be on guard against such a strange technique." Zhang Lu said, "This is a talisman that bewitches the mind. It comes from the same source as Zhang Jiao's demonic techniques. As long as you supervise the soldiers to drink the talisman water I made, they will be able to resist the power of Yuan Shi's talisman. Bai Xiaowen led the army to Nanjing City. He saw the sturdy city and set up camp. Bai Xiaowen gathered the generals to discuss the plan to take down the city. Time, before the general's summoning drum. Location, Zhang Xiu's tent. Characters, Zhang Xiu, Jia Su. The small show began. Zhang Xiu saw Jia Su busy writing and drawing and asked, "Mister, you still have the mood to write a letter here?" Jia Su smiled. "This is not as simple as a letter. This is a step for me to improve." "What do you mean?" Jia Su said, "Nanjing is the capital of Hanzhong. Zhang Lu has been in business for many years and built an iron fortress. The Duke of Yan will be able to take it down in the end. However, it will take a long time and affect the next step of the plan to take Sichuan." Zhang Xiu nodded. "And then?" Jia Su smiled. "It's only you, General. I won't tell anyone else, so please come closer." Zhang Xiu leaned over. Jia Su whispered, "Do you know that there's a person called Yang Song in Nanjing City? He's greedy and has no integrity. He's the easiest to bribe. Most importantly, Zhang Lu can't tell the difference. Yang Song has a high position in Hanzhong. We just need to do this to take down the city." Zhang Xiu said, "Why don't you offer this to the Duke of Yan?" Jia Su smiled. Zhang Xiu understood and said helplessly, "Mister, don't make the same mistake as last time." Jia Su smiled. "I'm sure that the Duke of Yan won't think of this. This isn't a decision made by intelligence but by experience. The Duke of Yan is only in his 20s and doesn't know much about the people in the various provinces. Even if he's a genius, he wouldn't be able to think of this plan if he doesn't know Yang Song's character. I don't need to wait too long. As long as the Duke of Yan hits a wall in Nanjing City, I'll come out and offer him a plan." Zhang Xiu said in admiration, "Mister, you're really smart." Then, Zhang Xiu followed the sound of the general's summoning drum and came to Bai Xiaowen's camp. Bai Xiaowen asked the generals if they had a good plan to take down the city. All of them lowered their heads in silence. Bai Xiaowen said, "It's not difficult to take down Nanjing. No matter how strong the city is, it can be taken down from the inside." Zhang He and Zhang Xiu asked, "Is Lord going to use the same method as before?" They recalled the strange fire at night in the camp at Yangping Pass. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. "The same method can be used once, but not twice. I'm going to bribe someone from Nanjing City to work for me." "Eh? General Zhang Xiu, what's wrong?" Zhang Xiu coughed and his face turned red. "No, nothing, I just choked on my saliva." Chapter 1325. Bai Xiaowen sent Li Shi to sneak into Nanjing City through the east gate at night and meet with Yang Song. As an awakened with high agility, Li Shi had no problem sneaking into Nanjing. However, it was impossible for her to kill the guards and open the city gates alone. One couldn't underestimate the strength of the natives of the Three Kingdoms. The guards of Nanjing City had at least one commander-level general, a large number of elite leaders, and a large number of crossbowmen who took turns on night duty. Even if Li Shi performed exceptionally and killed the East Gate general, she was bound to be surrounded by the elite leaders and shot by the crossbowmen. She wouldn't be able to escape even if she had wings. After all, awakened ones had too little HP. They weren't like Spirit Realm Lords and Commanders who had extra HP and damage reduction ratios. The natives' army had always been the awakened one's nemesis. After seeing Yang Song, Li Shi first offered him gold, silver, and jewelry. Then, he mentioned the Duke of Yan's good intentions for accepting him. Yang Song's eyes lit up when he saw so much gold and silver. He also heard that the Duke of Yan would reward him based on his contributions and might even be conferred the title of Marquis. Yang Song patted his chest and said, "Reply to the Duke of Yan and tell him not to worry. I've been wanting to join the Duke of Yan for a long time. I once advocated for surrendering, but Zhang Lu didn't listen to me. Now that the Duke of Yan's army is at the city gates, I'm willing to be a spy. As long as the east gate raises a white flag at 4 o'clock, I'll secretly open the city gates. Although Li Shi despised this kind of guide in his heart, he was still very happy on the surface. After agreeing on a few more details, he left and sneaked out of the city to return to Bai Xiaowen's camp. Yang Song thought for a moment and asked his servant to invite his brother Yang Bai to discuss the matter of offering the city. Yang Bai said, "This isn't difficult. I have a good relationship with Li Ji, the East Gate General. Elder brother, come with me and persuade Li Ji to submit to the Duke of Yan and open the city gates. What do you think?" Yang Song happily said, "If we can succeed, you and I, brothers, will be rich and powerful." The two of them then went to the East Gate to persuade Li Ji. Unexpectedly, as soon as Li Ji heard the purpose of their visit, his countenance changed and he said, "Eat the emperor's salary, be loyal to the emperor. You betrayed your master and defected to the enemy, leaving behind an infamy for eternity, yet you still want to drag me down with you?" Immediately he ordered the soldiers on his left and right to capture the two. Yang Song and Yang Bai looked at each other in disbelief. They didn't just randomly pick Li Ji to work for them. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Li Ji's usual behavior was not that of a loyal and honest person. That was why the Yang Song brothers took the risk to persuade him. Soon after, another group of people came out from behind the tent. When Yang Song saw this, he was so scared that his face turned ashen. The leader of this group of people was his lord, Zhang Lu. Now Yang Song and Yang Bai understood why Li Ji's behavior was so abnormal. Behind Zhang Lu were Zhang Wei, Yang Ren, and other Hanzhong generals. In addition to these familiar faces, there was also a man wearing a bamboo hat, whose face could not be seen clearly. He was standing to the side of Zhang Lu. Looking at his position, he and Zhang Lu seemed to be quite distant. Zhang Wei sternly said, "Yang Song betrayed his master. Has my brother ever mistreated you? Execute him." The man wearing the bamboo hat waved his hand and said, "Wait a moment. Shizuan, please listen to me." Zhang Lu said, "If not for Mr. Shan's warning, I would have been betrayed by this despicable person. If Mr. Shan has any theories, please enlighten me." The man wearing the bamboo hat cupped his hands and said, "I don't dare. It's just that Yuan Shi is very powerful now. Even if he executes Yang Song, it will be useless. In the end, it will be difficult to defend Hanzhong. It would be better to beat him at his own game and earn Yuan Shi's money to enter the city. Then we can set up strong crossbows and shoot him dead." Zhang Lu said with some hesitation, "If we do that, we will have offended Yuan Shi to the extreme." Zhang Wei said, "Yuan Shi has already come knocking on our door, yet elder brother is still hesitating. Could it be that you really want to entrust the lives of your entire family to Yuan Shi's benevolence?" Thereupon, Zhang Lu made up his mind and interrogated Yang Song, "What kind of secret agreement did you have with Yuan Shi? Tell me the truth, and I will spare your life. But if you don't tell me the truth, your entire family, from top to bottom, will be beheaded." Yang Song was a despicable person without any backbone. Betraying Zhang Lu was a bit of a psychological burden, but betraying Bai Xiaowen did not give him the slightest bit of guilt. Pouring soybeans out of a bamboo tube, he told Zhang Lu everything about the secret agreement at the fourth watch of the night, when the white flag was presented at the gate. Zhang Lu nodded and ordered the city's army to set up an ambush at the east gate. As for Yang Song and Yang Bai, Zhang Lu originally wanted to spare their lives and put them in prison. Who would have thought that Zhang Wei would behead them with 2 saber strikes? Zhang Lu said, "I have already said that I will spare their lives. You killed them, you made me break my promise." Zhang Wei said, "Elder brother, you don't need to keep your word with this kind of despicable person. Yang Song is in a high position, he has colluded with a lot of officials, civil and military officials in the city. If we let him live, it will inevitably lead to a great disaster. Right now, we need to send people to capture Yang Song and Yang Bai's families and behead them as well, so that they won't seek revenge." Zhang Lu looked at the man in the bamboo hat. The man in the bamboo hat was silent, he did not seem to agree with Zhang Wei's action. Zhang Lu said, "Don't kill them for the time being. Take Yang Song and Yang Bai's families into custody. After we break through Yuan tonight, we'll deal with them. After Li Shi reported back, Bai Xiaowen gathered the generals and said, I have already sent General Li to infiltrate the city and bribed Yang Song, one of Zhang Lu's subordinates. Yang Song agreed to open the city gate at the 4th watch of the night with the white flag as the signal. Who is willing to enter the city? Ma Chao said, I am willing. Bai Xiaowen said, although Yang Song's surrender is highly credible, entering the city is still risky. Ma Chao said, ever since I entered Sichuan, I have not accomplished anything. My father's hatred has not been avenged. As his son, how can I be greedy for life and afraid of death? I hope the Duke of Yan will allow me to be the first to enter the city. Bai Xiaowen nodded, very well. Meng Qi enters the city, I will lead the army to support him. This battle will definitely break through Nanjing. Ma Chao, Ma Dai, Ma Yunlu and the others led the army in advance. Bai Xiaowen assigned the army to support them. The division of troops had already been decided. The generals received the order and left. Suddenly, Bai Xiaowen frowned. He paced around the tent twice and asked Gu Xian, Dao Zhang, I feel uneasy. I don't know why. Gu Xian said, how far has young master studied the Taiping Sutra? Bai Xiaowen said, the army lacks leisure time and my foundation is shallow. So far, I have only studied up to that section. Gu Xian's expression did not change, but his heart was in turmoil. He said, young master does not need to be modest. To be able to study up to that section so quickly, it shows that young master is a talented cultivator. After a pause, Gu Xian continued, cultivators pay attention to the unity of man and nature. Young master's uneasiness must be due to some external variable that caused your heart to sense it. Could it be that something unexpected happened during the attack on Nanjing? Bai Xiaowen frowned. He took out the mountain river geographical map and said, I will give it a try. Actually, investigating Yang Song's whereabouts was the simplest and most effective way to verify the information. However, Bai Xiaowen had never seen Yang Song's appearance, so he could not investigate. On second thought, he investigated Zhang Wei and Yang Ren, the 2 generals of Hanzhong. After investigating, Bai Xiaowen was shocked. He stood up and said, not good. Chapter 1326. On the mountain river geographical map, Bai Xiaowen could clearly see that Zhang Wei and Yang Ren, 2 Hanzhong generals, were at the east gate. Even a fool would know that the plan had changed and the east gate had become a dragon's pool and tiger's den. After seeing this, Gu Xian was also somewhat surprised. He said, I'm afraid Ma Chao has already traveled more than half of the way. It's too late to chase him back. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He called Sun Yu, how many soldiers are left in the camp? Sun Yu said, 20,000. Led by Han Qiong, Chao Hong, Zhu Hu, and other generals, there are more than 10 generals guarding the camp. Bai Xiaowen nodded, enough. Sun Yu asked, does the Duke of Yan have a plan? Bai Xiaowen said, those who go cannot be remonstrated, those who come can be pursued. The previous division is enough to make the enemy believe that I have fallen into their trap. They will definitely concentrate their forces at the east gate. As long as I lead a personal army to attack the west gate, I will definitely be able to break the city. Sun Yu praised, the Duke of Yan's divine strategy is unfathomable. East gate. At the 4th watch, a white flag was raised from the top of the city wall. The drawbridge at the east gate was quietly lowered and the city gate opened. Ma Chao was anxious. He immediately urged the vanguard to enter the east gate. Ma Dai and Ma Yunlu followed behind him. On the city wall, Zhang Wei and Yang Ren were half squatting behind the arrow stacks. They saw Ma Chao enter the city. Yang Ren said, this person is not Yuan Shi, but Ma Chao of Shiliang. What should we do? Zhang Wei said, the ambush has been set. We have to attack. Killing Ma Chao can be considered as breaking one of Yuan Shi's arms. A cannon shot was heard. All around the barbican stood up a dense group of archers. Ma Chao hurriedly raised his head. Seeing this familiar scene, he shouted, "Not good," and immediately ordered the army to turn back. Jiang Wei shouted, "Ma Chao! You have fallen into the trap. Close the gate." 10,000 arrows were shot like a storm. Ma Dai and Ma Yinlu rushed to Ma Chao's left and right, brandishing their swords and spears to deflect the arrows and protect Ma Chao as they retreated. Countless other soldiers were killed by the arrows and crossbows. However, today's ambush was different from the one in Chang'an. Back in Chang'an, when the army was defeated, Ma Chao, who was at the end of his rope, was ambushed by Bai Xiaowen. Even if he could rush out of the city, it would be difficult for him to escape death. Now that Ma Chao was in southern Zheng, the army was waiting for him outside. As long as he could rush out of the city, there was a high chance that he would survive. Seeing that the city gates were about to close, Ma Chao roared. His entire body was enveloped in a layer of blood-red light. He raised his spear and shot out angrily. The tiger-head clear gold spear flew out, bringing with it a sharp gust of air. Under the powerful force, it accurately struck the core of the city gate, penetrating 1 foot deep. The handle of the spear was still trembling slightly. With a creak, the city gate was jammed shut, leaving only a gap wide enough for a person to pass through. No matter how hard the guards pushed, they could not close the city gate, let alone lock it. Ma Dai and Ma Yinlu were also hit by a few arrows. However, they were all rare-grade leaders, so these small injuries were not a problem. They charged forward and used their weapons to kill the guards at the city gate. Outside the city, Zhang He, Zhang Xiu, and the other generals saw that the city gates were closed and the drawbridge was raised. They knew that they had fallen into a trap and rushed forward to provide support. However, with the city protection river and Zhang Lu's preparations, the Yuan army could not get close to the city gates. At the east gate of Zhang Lu's army, a group of elites charged out from the 2 side rooms to stop Ma Chao from escaping out of the city. Ma Chao had lost his tiger-head clear gold spear and his horse had been stabbed. He could only pull out his sword and kill the enemy. The few thousand soldiers he led were ambushed, and their morale had hit rock bottom. They could not fight at all. In the chaos, Ma Chao fought back and forth. Wherever his sword flashed, there would definitely be enemies that died. Although he was hit by 3 arrows, his bravery increased. On the city wall, Zhang Lu's generals saw this scene and looked at each other in shock. Jiang Wei pointed at Ma Chao and said, "If we don't get rid of this person, he will be a huge threat to our Hanzhong." Yang Ren looked at the Yuan army outside the city and said, "There are many of them, and they should be coming for the east gate. We need to end this quickly so that we don't lose the east gate when the Yuan army and Ma Chao combine forces." Jiang Wei let Yang Ren be in charge of defending the east gate. He personally went to find Zhang Lu to send more men to defend the east gate. Zhang Lu was in the city. When he heard that Ma Chao was the first to enter the city, he was half happy and half worried. He was happy that the Yuan army fell for the trap, but worried that Yuan Shi did not enter the city. Beside him was Yan Pu and the mysterious bamboo hat man, Mr. Shan. Mr. Shan said, "Don't worry. Even if we can't kill Yuan Shi this time, losing Ma Chao will cause the Yuan army's morale to plummet. We only need to defend for a few months and the Yuan army will retreat." Yan Pu asked, "Why does Mr. Shan say that the Yuan army will retreat?" Mr. Shan took off his bamboo hat, revealing a middle-aged man with a beard that could not hide his heroic spirit. He said slowly, "Today, all the northern warlords have been wiped out by Yuan Shi. Other than the 2 rivers, only Lu Tsong of Jingzhou and Sun Su of Jiangdong are left in the south. The Sun and Lu families are afraid of Yuan Shi. They will not tolerate him conquering the 2 rivers. I am sure that in less than a month, Sun and Lu will make their move and threaten Yuzhou, Yenzhou and other places, forcing Yuan Shi to retreat." Yan Pu said admiringly, "Mr. Shan is wise." Zhang Lu's mind calmed down a bit. Suddenly Jiang Wei arrived and reported that Ma Chao at the east gate was valiant and brave. Moreover, the Yuan army outside had many men. They needed to send more men as reinforcements. Zhang Lu asked his strategist's opinion and ordered reinforcements to be sent. They must capture and kill Ma Chao and must not let him go. The messenger left, but Zhang Wei stayed and sat beside Zhang Lu. Elder brother said that Yuan Shi is rare in the world. Now it seems that he is just an ordinary person who fell for Mr. Shan's plan. Zhang Wei praised Mr. Shan. Mr. Shan is the one with true wisdom. Mr. Shan shook his head and said, how can there be a person in the world who can plan everything? To be able to gain the upper hand in this scheme, it was just that I didn't have the foresight. I admit that I am inferior to Yuan Shi in terms of strategy. Reporting, before Mr. Shan could finish his words, a junior colonel rushed over, stumbling. Reporting to my lord. A large number of enemy troops have appeared at the west gate. They have already climbed up the city wall. Look at the flags, they are Yuan Shi's personal guards. Zhang Lu and Zhang Wei stood up at the same time. What? West gate, the two quickly walked out of the mansion. Mr. Shan and the others hurriedly followed behind them. At the west gate of Nanjing City, a patch of fire shot into the sky. Battle cries rose and fell. The Yuan army had already broken through the city gate and entered the city. The defeated army arrived one after another. Zhang Wei grabbed an elite leader that he recognized and shouted, "Stop! How did you lose the west gate so quickly?" That elite leader said with a sad face, "General, you may not know, but that Yuan Shi knows Yao arts." The moment he raised his hand, the brothers by our side lost the ability to resist. Even the talisman water bestowed by Master was useless. Didn't you have a drum? Why didn't you sound the drum and break Yuan Shi's Yao arts? Zhang Lu shouted. General Zhang Cheng already tried, but it was useless. The elite leader said. Chapter 1327. Hearing the battle cries getting clearer, Zhang Lu panicked and said, now that Nanjing has been breached, we can only surrender to the Duke of Yen. Yen Pu said, when Nanjing was under siege, the Duke of Yen would have given us preferential treatment if we surrendered to him. But now that the city has been breached and we are exhausted, surrendering is not a good idea. Mr. Shan said, in my opinion, why don't you take the south gate and flee to Bajong to defend the city? When Sun Lu rises, Yuan Shi will withdraw his troops. You can then raise your voice and restore Hanzhong to its former glory. Zhang Wei felt that it made sense and tried his best to persuade Zhang Lu. Zhang Lu listened to the three's advice and led hundreds of his men to escape through the south gate. Bai Xiaowen's army occupied Nanjing and quickly swept away the remaining resistance of Zhang Lu's army. He personally led his army from west to east to attack the east gate and support Ma Chao. Yang Ren at the east gate was attacked from both front and rear and could not help but panic. Bai Xiaowen shouted, Yang Ren. At this point, why don't you surrender? Yang Ren gritted his teeth and said, don't even think about it. But Bai Xiaowen's army had already charged out from the inside and climbed to the top of the city wall. The archers under Yang Ren's command all knelt down and surrendered. Yang Ren saw that the situation was hopeless and jumped down from the top of the city wall, preparing to escape. But from the side, an army rushed over. It was Ma Chao who had found a gap and chased after Yang Ren on another warhorse. He raised his spear and stabbed Yang Ren down. By Xiaowen's side, Yang Ren was one of the few loyal generals in Hanzhong. Unfortunately, he did not know how to adapt to the situation. He ordered his men to bury him. Ma Chao had been shot several times but he was still in good spirits. He rode his horse to Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen said, Meng Qi was ambushed and that was my fault. Fortunately, Meng Qi was brave enough to protect himself. Ma Chao did not dwell on this issue and asked, did the Duke of Yen capture Zhang Lu? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, he is not in the city. Ma Chao's expression turned ugly. That bastard got away again. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, why are you in such a hurry? Since Nanjing had fallen, where could Zhang Lu escape to? In less than 4 hours, he will be captured by me. Zhang Lu and Zhang Wei took Yen Pu and several hundred bodyguards and fled to Bajong. The terrain in the middle of Sichuan was very dangerous. Fortunately, the guards were familiar with the local roads, otherwise, they would definitely get lost. When they reached a narrow path, Zhang Lu's expression suddenly changed. There's someone up ahead. As soon as these words were shouted, the sound of drums could be heard, and a group of soldiers and horses came out in formation. Qiao Rui, Han Su, Li Shi, and Camille led 1,000 elites to block the front. Qiao Rui spoke in a clear voice, "Zhang Lu, my lord has said that even if you surrender now, you will not lose your marquis title. If you resist stubbornly, it will be too late for regrets." Zhang Wei said sternly, "How dare you little pawns block the way?" His horse brandished its sabers and charged. Camille pulled out her spear and was about to shoot, but Qiao Rui stopped her. Li Shi had already met the attack, his two swords like a drizzle of rain. In just one exchange, several bloody lines appeared on Zhang Wei's warhorse and it fell down with a neigh. Even Zhang Wei fell and rolled on the ground. Li Shi tapped the ground with the tip of his toes and moved 7 or 8 meters horizontally as if riding the clouds. He once again closed in on Zhang Wei, his two swords like a tempest. Zhang Wei was no match for Li Shi. Whether he fought back desperately or blocked, he could not stop Li Shi's mercury-like attacks. Like a small knife cutting through flesh, Zhang Wei's life was constantly being sapped away. "Wait! Stop fighting, I give up." Zhang Wei kept begging for mercy. He did not expect the female general in front of him to be so strong that he could not resist at all. However, Li Shi's two swords were faster and faster. He had no intention of stopping. "Is it appropriate to kill him?" "I think he's Zhang Lu's younger brother," Camille whispered. Qiao Rui shook his head. "Captain has already said that Zhang Lu can live, but Zhang Wei must die." Zhang Lu was shocked and scared to see Zhang Wei being suppressed. Although he knew some Taoist techniques, he had not been on the battlefield for a long time and did not dare to fight personally. He could only say, "Stop fighting. We'll surrender, okay?" However, it was too late. The fire damage from Li Shi's demonic fire jade pendant and the cumulative damage from the poison skill exploded together, taking away Zhang Wei's life. Qiao Rui said, "Zhang Wei has not given up on his evil intentions. My lord has long heard that he has repeatedly tempted you to resist the imperial court. If you want to live a peaceful life and be a Marquis of Taiping, Zhang Wei cannot be allowed to live." Zhang Lu dismounted from his horse and cried bitterly while caressing Zhang Wei's corpse. Then, he said, "I've long wanted to surrender to the Duke of Yan, but this subordinate refused." Qiao Rui immediately led the troops to escort Zhang Lu, Yan Pu, and a group of personal attendants back to Nanjing. Nanjing City. Bai Xiaowen received Zhang Lu. At this moment, Zhang Lu was still in shock. After all, his younger brother had been killed in front of him. He was afraid that Bai Xiaowen would chop him up as well. Bai Xiaowen did not do so. Instead, he comforted Zhang Lu. "Although you were not conferred a title by the imperial court, you have governed Hanzhong for many years. You have ensured peace and prosperity, and the population is abundant. Your achievements are more outstanding than many provincial governors conferred by the imperial court. Today, I will confer you the title of Marquis of Langzhong, and you will live in 1,000 villages. I will prepare a grand residence for you in Xizhou. You can live there for the rest of your life." It was already good enough for a defeated duke to be reared in captivity. Moreover, he had been conferred the title of Marquis. Zhang Lu thanked him. Bai Xiaowen did not want to kill Zhang Lu. Zhang Lu had governed Hanzhong for many years and had won the hearts of the people. Killing him would not only disappoint the people of Hanzhong, but it would also cause Lu Zhang to be conflicted when conquering Sichuan. Moreover, Ma Chao was still waiting. Bai Xiaowen saw Ma Chao's hesitant expression and said to Zhang Lu, "Now, I will ask you something. You must answer truthfully." Zhang Lu quickly nodded. Bai Xiaowen asked, "That day, after old General Ma Teng died, you wrote a letter to Ma Chao stating that you would give up the fight for the position of Guanzhong's third assistant. Who taught you this?" After Bai Xiaowen asked this question, he saw Zhang Lu's hesitant expression and said, "Don't try to lie. You must not be the only one who saw that person. I will ask your subordinates later. There must be someone who knows." Zhang Lu quickly said, "How would I dare to deceive the Duke of Yan? There was indeed such a person who told me to write a letter to give up the position of third assistant and stay away from trouble. Ma Chao could not help but ask, is that person under Liu Bei's camp called Jian Yong? Zhang Lu shook his head in confusion. Jian Yong? No, he calls himself Dan Fu. He is from Jingzhou and has traveled here. When Bai Xiaowen heard the name Dan Fu, he had an idea. He asked, did Dan Fu say who he is serving now? Zhang Lu shook his head. He did not say this. Dan Fu is skilled in both the pen and the sword. He is quite intelligent. I usually call him Mr. Dan instead of his name. Where is this person now? Bai Xiaowen asked. When the city was breached, Dan Fu advised me to flee south to Bajong and wait for an opportunity. He was originally with me, but for some reason, he disappeared. Zhang Lu answered. Chapter 1328. Ma Chao was furious. But I don't know who this Dan Fu is. Was it Liu Bei who killed my father? Sun Yu smiled. I know about this Dan Fu. Everyone looked at Sun Yu. Bai Xiaowen said, please enlighten me, military advisor. Sun Yu said, this person's real name is not Dan Fu, nor is he from Jingzhou. He is from Yingchuan. His surname is Su, his name is Shu, and his courtesy name is Yuanji. When Su Shu was young, he was fond of fencing. He once killed people to avenge his friend. He walked in the market with his hair and face smeared. No one dared to approach him. Later, he was caught by the government. When asked his name, he refused to answer. The government tied him to a carriage and paraded him through the streets. They beat drums and asked the onlookers for his name. Although some of them knew him, no one dared to answer. Later, he was rescued. So he changed his name, gave up martial arts, and learned from famous teachers. Dan Fu is just a pseudonym. Sun Yu was also from Yingchuan, so it was not strange that he knew Su Shu. Bai Xiaowen said, if you say you are wrong, you must be wrong. Su Shu would not have changed his name to Dan Fu for no reason. He came to Hanzhong to persuade Zhang Lu to give up Guanzhong and put the blame on me. Ma Chao was silent. Ma Dai said, brother, although we don't know who Su Shu is, it is enough to prove that Zhang Lu's letter was not a coincidence. It was instigated by him. His intention is obviously to frame the Duke of Yen. It is obvious that the person who murdered uncle must be related to the power behind Jian Yong and Su Shu. It is very likely that it is Liu Bei. At least, it is definitely not the Duke of Yen. Ma Yunlu also advised, yes, brother. If the Duke of Yen was not in Chang'an and took the risk to explain the misunderstanding to you, I am afraid that we would be used as tools without knowing it. The best thing to do now is to pledge allegiance to the Duke of Yen and kill the enemy as soon as possible. Ma Chao hesitated for a moment, then knelt down on one knee and said to Bai Xiaowen, Ma Chao is grateful for Duke of Yan's kindness. If you don't mind, I am willing to serve you from now on. Bai Xiaowen helped Ma Chao up with a smile and said, Meng Qi, you are too serious. From now on, you will follow my army and fight against those who refuse to submit to me. Sooner or later, you will meet Liu Bei on the battlefield. At that time, you will have a chance to take revenge. Although he had subdued Ma Chao, Bai Xiaowen was still not at ease using him. Ma Chao was different from Pound. Judging from the novel, Ma Chao was similar to Lu Bu. In the official history, Ma Chao revolted against Cao Cao when his father, Ma Teng, was in Su Du. It could be said that Ma Chao caused his father's death. At that time, Han Sui also had a hostage in Su Du. In order to persuade Han Sui to rise up with him, Ma Chao actually said, from today onwards, I will have no father, and you will have no son. You will be my father, and I will be your son. In the novel, Ma Chao was already beautified. It was said that Ma Teng tried to rebel against Cao Cao and Su Du. He failed and was killed. Then, Ma Chao rose up to take revenge. Of course, the three kingdoms of the spirit world were based on how much the novel spread. Since the novel spread more than the official history, it was mainly based on the novel. However, even the Ma Chao in the novel did not make people feel at ease. He rose up with Han Sui and fell out with Han Sui. Then, he followed Zhang Lu and rebelled against Zhang Lu. Although the novel tried to give Ma Chao a way out, one could understand a thing or two if they thought about Liu Bei's attitude after subduing Ma Chao. Liu Bei's attitude towards this fierce Xiliang general who hated Cao Cao was that he was indifferent. Although he was one of the 5 tiger generals, he was just a clay statue. He was almost never given military power. The famous generals of the 3 kingdoms, other than those who died, generally lived longer. However, Ma Chao only lived to 45 or 46 years old before dying with hatred. A large part of it was because Liu Bei did not use him, causing him to be unable to take revenge. Liu Bei was very good at reading people. He did not use Ma Chao because he had deep considerations. However, Bai Xiaowen only had a few months in the 3 kingdoms of the spirit world. Although Ma Chao should be used carefully, it did not mean that he could not use him. First, let's talk about the necessity. The generals under Liu Bei's command were too famous and too strong. In the case of Lu Bu and Dian Wei's death, Zhao Yun and Guan Yu were firmly in the top 3 of the famous generals of the 3 kingdoms. Zhang Fei could also be in the top 5, followed by Huang Zhong. With so many lord-level fierce generals at the top, it was really stressful. With Ma Chao, at least one of them could be eliminated, greatly reducing the gap between Bai Xiaowen and the top lords. As for the Sun clan of Jiangdong, unlike in the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms, Sun Ce did not die. Of course, Sun Ce had the strength of a top lord, so he should not be seriously injured by several followers like in the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms. Unless, like in the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms, he provoked Yu Ji. However, if Yu Ji cursed Sun Ce to death, it would be a bit of resignation. Under Sun Ce's command, Zhou Yu and Taisher Ci could not be underestimated, not to mention the top awakened Sun Yi. As for how to use Ma Chao, Bai Xiaowen had already made 2 preparations in advance. First, Ma Ting's death. Now all the clues pointed to Liu Bei. In order to take revenge for his father, Ma Chao must obey Bai Xiaowen's orders. Otherwise, without territory and army, how could Ma Chao seek revenge on Liu Bei? In the case of Liu Bei and his father's death, Ma Chao was unlikely to rebel. The second point was to cut off Ma Chao's wings. Although Pound was a lord, there was still a gap between him and a top-tier lord. Bai Xiaowen had taken Pound's heart in order to make Ma Chao a loner. Bai Xiaowen's predetermined role for Ma Chao was to be a valiant general who charged into battle, not a commander who took charge of an area. After taking in Pound, Ma Chao was further closer to his predetermined role. Of course, there were still Ma Dai, Ma Yinlu, and others who still followed Ma Chao. They were family ties, so it was difficult to deal with them like taking in Pound. However, Bai Xiaowen also prepared other means, such as transferring Ma Dai, Ma Yinlu, and others. If necessary, he could use the beauty trap to make Ma Chao have no trustworthy subordinates around him. This way, the possibility of betrayal would be reduced to the greatest extent. After taking in Ma Chao, Bai Xiaowen ordered Zhang Lu to set up county governors and commandants in the various prefectures of Hanzhong, making Hanzhong his territory. Then, he learned from Cao Cao in history and moved the population of Hanzhong to Guanzhong. He ordered that those who were willing to move would be given farmland and seeds, and they would be exempted from taxes for 2 years. Bai Xiaowen would not be able to enjoy the benefits of such good governance for the time being, but it could weaken the strength of Hanzhong and consolidate his rule. Bai Xiaowen took charge of Nanjing and dealt with political matters for several days. There were many things to do, such as moving the population and settling the county governors. It was a little difficult to rely on Sun Yu's help alone. Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen had a good memory, so he did not make any mistakes. However, this meant that he had less time to read the heavenly book. Why hasn't Grandpa Jia shown up? With him around, he can at least share some of my burden. Bai Xiaowen sighed. On this day, someone suddenly reported that Liu Zhang of Yi province had sent an envoy to visit Duke Yin. Chapter 1329. Bai Xiaowen knew about this news long ago, even earlier than the person who reported it. After Lu Zhang's envoy entered Hanzhong, he was first welcomed by Qiao Rui, then by Li Shui, and finally by Cecilia. They practically escorted him all the way into Nanjing. The reason was simple: this envoy was called Zhang Song. Zhang Song was a famous trader in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. However, he left behind a rather positive evaluation. When Zhang Song died, there was even a mourning poem. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, among the countless traders, Zhang Song was the only one who received a mourning poem. On one hand, Zhang Song was quite arrogant. He didn't offer Izhou for fame and fortune, but for a higher reason, for the sake of a wise ruler. On the other hand, Zhang Song had a photographic memory. This talent made the author of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, famous but not famous, feel sympathetic. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Zhang Song was sent as an envoy to Cao Cao. Originally, he wanted to offer Izhou to Cao Cao. However, Cao Cao judged people based on their appearances. This made the ugly and arrogant Zhang Song feel very hurt. Then, on his way back to Izhou, he was intercepted by Liu Bei. At that time, Liu Bei only had Jingzhou and was anxious to take Sichuan. It could be said that he was very attentive to Zhang Song. First, he sent Zhao Yun to welcome him. Then, he sent Guan Yu. Finally, Liu Bei personally brought Zhuge Liang to entertain Zhang Song. After a few days of drinking and feasting, Zhang Song finally accepted him and decided to offer Izhou to Liu Bei. Bai Xiaowen was now the Duke of Yan, so he couldn't personally welcome him like Liu Bei. Otherwise, not only would Zhang Song find it strange, but even his subordinates would feel that it was unfair. Even if Bai Xiaowen did not personally welcome him, the extravagance of the three trusted subordinates welcoming him was enough to give Zhang Song enough face. Bai Xiaowen met Zhang Song in the governor's mansion of Nanjing. Zhang Song was the same as in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. His appearance was indeed a bit unsightly. In the ancient Huaxia, where people were judged by their appearance, to be able to hold the position of Izhou's special guest required ability. When Zhang Songchu saw Bai Xiaowen, he paid his respects according to etiquette and presented Lu Zhang's letter. After Bai Xiaowen opened it and read it, he smiled and said to the people around him, "Lu Zhang saw that I had pacified Hanzhong and felt uneasy in his heart. Therefore, he sent an emissary to inquire when I would withdraw the troops." In other words, he was testing whether or not I had the intention to take over Sichuan. Sun Yu said, "The people of Yi Province are rich, the population is abundant. Hanzhong is the gateway to Yi Province. Now that the Duke of Yan has taken Hanzhong, how can we abandon Izhou?" The other generals nodded in agreement. Bai Xiaowen said in a low voice, "I've long heard that Izhou's mountain roads are rugged and there are many passes. If there is no one in Shu leading the army, it will not be easy to collect them." This was an obvious hint. However, Zhang Song did not have the slightest reaction. His pair of mung bean-sized eyes looked around, but he did not speak. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, "What do you think, Sir Zhang? If you can help the imperial court to recover Izhou, you will be rewarded with a high position and generous salary." Zhang Song curled his lips and said with a smile, "There are no treacherous people in Sichuan." The civil and military officials under Bai Xiaowen were somewhat indignant. If Zhang Song's words were interpreted in an extended manner, it meant that your way of doing things will not work in Sichuan. In other words, there were treacherous people in Sichuan. When Bai Xiaowen saw that some of his civil and military officials wanted to refute Zhang Song, he hurriedly raised his hand to stop them and said with a smile, "Don't come from afar and work hard. You can rest in the inn for a while. After I think about it, I will write a reply to your lord." After Zhang Song retreated, the generals under his command said one after another, "My lord is very polite to Zhang Song and personally came to recruit him. This Zhang Song has eyes but does not see and does not recognize the true lord. There is no need to be polite to him." Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, "My true intention is to take over Sichuan, but I must win their hearts. I intend to subdue this Zhang Song, but I can only show him kindness and not force him to do so." After this meeting ended unhappily, the internal drama among the teammates began. Xiao Rui said, "Hey, this is the first time I see the charming captain being defeated." Cecilia said, "Yes, for this meeting, Dior even recited an ancient poem." Li Shi said, "Zhang Song is a man, and an ugly one at that. Perhaps his aesthetic standards are different from ordinary people?" Hansu, by Xiaowen. "If Jinmi was not here, would I be defeated?" Li Shi, "Yes, yes, yes." By Xiaowen. "Ahem, the weather is good today. I am going to treat Zhang Song to a meal. You guys can go about your business." Zhang Song stayed in Nanjing's for 3 consecutive days. During these 3 days, Bai Xiaowen invited Zhang Song to a banquet every day and made use of his high charm to befriend Zhang Song. Zhang Song's attitude gradually changed from pretending to be arrogant to discussing the people of the world and local customs with Bai Xiaowen every day. Zhang Song was indeed a knowledgeable person. If not for Bai Xiaowen's broad horizons and quick reflexes, he might not have been able to keep up with Zhang Song's pace of conversation. On the 3rd day, Zhang Song stood up at the banquet and said, "Duke of Yan, I have been staying here for a long time. My master, Lu Zhang, urgently needs a reply." Bai Xiaowen sighed and said, "Zhang Song and I hit it off at first sight. Don't leave now. I don't know when we will meet again." As he spoke, Bai Xiaowen's eyes turned a little red. He did not have the ability to cry as easily as Liu Bei. Now that he was the Duke of Yan, he had the burden of being an idol. The red circles around his eyes were the result of him secretly rubbing some wine on them. Zhang Song was touched. He suddenly bowed and said, "To be honest, I left Sichuan on the surface to be an envoy. In fact, I want to seek a good master. A few days ago, I pretended to be arrogant just to test the Duke of Yan's mind. Although the Duke of Yan is young, he has great talent and vision. He swept the north and unified the central plains. With such a miraculous achievement, he can still be polite to the wise. It is really beyond Zhang Song's expectations. I am willing to offer the geographical map of Sichuan's 41 provinces and counties to help the Duke of Yan achieve a peerless foundation." Bai Xiaowen was overjoyed. He hurriedly helped Zhang Song up and said, "I have Zhang Song, like Zhou as Lu Wang, and Han as Zhang Liang." Even Zhang Song, who thought highly of himself, was a little embarrassed when he heard these 2 words of flattery. However, these words came from the mouth of the Duke of Yan. It was basically the evaluation of the number 1 person in the world. Zhang Song was naturally very happy. Then, the banquet started again. Bai Xiaowen asked about the situation in Shu. Zhang Song did not hide anything and told him one by one. It turned out that there was a period of time when Bai Xiaowen had just pacified Ma Chao and was conferred the title of Duke of Yan. Zhang Lu of Hanzhong wanted to establish himself as the king of Hanning, but he was stopped by Yan Pu and the others. In order to prevent Zhang Lu from establishing himself as the king, Yan Pu persuaded Zhang Lu to merge with Sichuan first. When the time came, it would not be too late for him to become the king of Hanning. Dan Fu, who was staying here as a guest, also agreed. Zhang Lu did not have his own opinions, so he took Yan Pu and Dan Fu's advice and stationed troops in Bajong to spy on Sichuan. Lu Zhang was afraid. Thus, under the urging of some people, he invited Liu Bei of Jingzhou to help Sichuan and resist Zhang Lu. Currently, Liu Bei was stationed at Jiaming Pass. Chapter 1330. Now, although Zhang Lu had been destroyed, Yuan Shi, who was even more ruthless, had appeared in Hanzhong. Lu Zhang could not figure out Yuan Shi's plan and was still hoping for a fluke. He had a grudge against Zhang Lu, so it was not surprising for the 2 families to fight. However, Lu Zhang thought that he had no grudge against Yuan Shi, so it was not strange for him to be hoping for a fluke. Therefore, he sent Zhang Song to sound him out. The major events of the romance of the 3 kingdoms have been brought forward. Is it because of my influence? Bai Xiaowen thought silently. The sequence of events in the romance of the 3 kingdoms was Cao Cao destroying Yuan, 3 visits to the thatched hut, the Battle of Red Cliff, Ma Chao sending troops, Cao Cao suppressing Hanzhong, and Liu Bei conquering Sichuan. However, before the Battle of Guandu, Zhuge Liang had been under Liu Bei's command. Later, Ma Chao sending troops and Bai Xiaowen conquering Hanzhong were all brought forward by several years. Bai Xiaowen, the transmigrator, could no longer be considered a butterfly, but a rock. His wings were like the clouds in the sky. When he flapped his wings, the worlds of the three kingdoms would be turbulent, and the subsequent history would be changed beyond recognition. Although the trajectory of history had changed, there were still traces to follow. Bai Xiaowen could tell that if Zhang Song's trip to Hanzhong did not go well, he would visit Liu Bei on the way back and help Liu Bei conquer Sichuan. For the past 3 days, Bai Xiaowen's eagerness for talent and humility had won Zhang Song's loyalty. Naturally, he had also intercepted Liu Bei. Zhang Song's geographical map of Sichuan was not very useful to Bai Xiaowen. After all, he had the Mountain River geographical map, which was an S-grade gold item. However, Zhang Song's support was very important to Liu Bei. Bai Xiaowen thought carefully about how to conquer Sichuan after gaining Zhang Song's support, so that Liu Bei would have no place to stay. Zhang Song did not know what Bai Xiaowen was thinking. After gaining Bai Xiaowen's favor, he wanted to repay him. I am not a person who betrays his master for glory. As the saying goes, a gentleman dies for his bosom friend. Now that I have met the Duke of Yen, he did not mind my ugly appearance and lowered himself to befriend me. How could I not work with all my heart to repay his kindness? Although Liu Jiu, referring to Liu Zhang, has He province's territory, his natural disposition is dark and weak, he cannot be used by virtuous people. If the Duke of Yen does not take Sichuan, Liu Bei will certainly take it. When that time comes, there will be Liu Bei in the west, and Sun Tzu in the east. With these two forces joining hands, the Duke of Yan's grand undertaking of unifying the world will have a variable. This was the great opportunity of the world. May the Duke of Yan investigate this matter. Speaking up to this point, Zhang Song took out a map from his bosom and said, "Before I came here, I secretly drew a map of the 41 provinces and counties in Sichuan and presented it to the Duke of Yan. But looking at this map, you will know the path in Shu." Bai Xiaowen took the map and unfolded it to look at it. Written on the map were the distance, the width of the road, the mountains and rivers, as well as the treasury, money and grain. Bai Xiaowen thanked Zhang Song and asked, "How are the people in Sichuan?" Zhang Song said, "Although there are many civil and military talents, their hearts are not of one mind. I have 2 close confidants, Fa Zheng and Meng De. Both of them are talented, but they have always been dissatisfied with Liu Zhang. When I go back this time, I will definitely persuade these 2 close friends to help the Duke of Yen." Bai Xiaowen grabbed Zhang Song's hand and said with a laugh, "Don't give me priceless advice, how can Gu disobey?" Zhang Song was delighted. The Duke of Yen must act quickly, otherwise there will be a change. If Sichuan is taken by Liu Bei, it will be too late to regret. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, "Not necessarily. Now Sichuan has Liu Bei and Liu Zhang. If I lead the army to force them, the 2 Lius will definitely work together to resist. With Liu Bei's support of grain, fodder, troops and horses, plus Liu Zhang's strategists and valiant generals, it will be difficult to take Sichuan in a short period of time. Instead, it will give Liu Bei the opportunity to control Sichuan's military power and win the hearts of the people in Sichuan." Zhang Song nodded and said, "The Duke of Yan's opinion is brilliant." Bai Xiaowen continued, "Liu Zhang's temperament is dark and weak. Although he invited Liu Bei to enter Sichuan, he must be on guard in his heart. Gu will first write back to Liu Bei and confer him the title of Marquis of Sichuan, indicating that I have no intention of taking Sichuan. When Gu returns to Yizhou, I will tell him the pros and cons and persuade him to expel Liu Bei. Liu Bei will inevitably change and cause the 2 Lius to turn against each other. That will be the time for Gu to enter Sichuan." Zhang Song was convinced by his wise opinion. He cupped his fists and bowed. The Duke of Yan's opinion is clear and thorough. When Song returns to Sichuan, I will do my best to cooperate and expel Liu Bei as soon as possible to welcome the Duke of Yen. Bai Xiaowen thus wrote a letter to Liu Zhang and gifted it to Zhang Song. He also drew a copy of the map of Sichuan and gave it to Zhang Song, instructing him to do so. Zhang Song nodded in agreement. Before Zhang Song returned to Yizhou, he purposely passed by a road near Jiaoming Pass. As expected, first Zhao Yun, then Guan Yu, welcomed Zhang Song and entered Jiaoming Pass for a chat. When Zhang Song arrived at Jiaoming Pass, Liu Bei had already led young Phoenix, Pang Tong, and Su Shu out of their seclusion to welcome him. Along the way, they inquired about his well-being and cared for him in every way possible. They were even warmer than Bai Xiaowen's hospitality. However, Zhang Song had already realized his self-worth in life from Bai Xiaowen. He couldn't help but feel a little disinterested in Liu Bei's hospitality. After receiving the sincere treatment of the most powerful person in the world and being treated as a close friend, it would be futile no matter how courteous an ordinary duke was. Furthermore, Bai Xiaowen's charisma was even higher than Liu Bei's. During the banquet, Liu Bei asked about the results of this diplomatic mission. Zhang Song said, Yuan Shi has achieved success at a young age. I only got to see him after staying at the inn for a few days. How infuriating. Liu Bei said, does Yuan Shi have any intention of attacking Sichuan? Zhang Song said, Yuan Shi thinks that the path to Sichuan is dangerous and difficult, so he has no intention of attacking. He plans to give Liu Zhang the title of Marquis of Sichuan. As long as Liu Zhang pays tribute every year, he will not attack Sichuan. Liu Bei and Pang Tong were deep in thought. They then asked Zhang Song to stay at Jiaoming Pass for a few days. Zhang Song declined. My lord, Liu Zhang, is still waiting for a reply. I can't stay for long. Liu Bei held Zhang Song's hand and cried, I feel like old friends at first sight. We can't do anything about fate. It's already late. Please don't stay at the pass for the night. It won't be too late to leave tomorrow. Zhang Song saw that Liu Bei was crying and quickly agreed. He was also quite emotional. Liu Bei's reputation for being benevolent and loving was indeed well-deserved. That night, Liu Bei hosted a banquet to entertain Zhang Song. The banquet was very lively. The two of them had a good conversation. Liu Bei invited Zhang Song to have a candlelight talk and sleep together. The next morning, Zhang Song bade farewell. Liu Bei brought Pang Tong, Su Shu, Zhao Yun, Guan Yu, and the others to accompany them for 10 miles. He even held Zhang Song's hand and was reluctant to part. Zhang Song said, Imperial uncle, you don't have to send us off anymore. Guarding the pass is more important. Liu Bei sighed, Yongnian, referring to Zhang Song, and I feel like old friends at first sight. I don't know when we'll meet again after parting today. As he spoke, tears stained his clothes again. Zhang Song was touched. He said, Song also wants to serve Imperial uncle by your side sooner or later. I only regret that I don't have the chance. If Imperial uncle doesn't abandon me, Song has one thing to say, Jingzhou is a strategic place. To the north is Yuan Shi, to the east is Sun Tzu. It is not a place where you can establish your foundation. The people of Yizhou are rich. Because of this, Gaozu became the emperor. Imperial uncle, why don't you take Yizhou as your home? When the world changes, you can lead your troops to the Central Plains and support the Han Dynasty. The world will be very fortunate. As he spoke, Zhang Song handed over the map of Sichuan. When Liu Bei heard this, he said, How dare you do this? Liu Jiyu has been in Shu for 2 generations. His benevolence is widespread. Pang Tong said, My lord is the imperial uncle of the Han Dynasty. Why can't you occupy a province? Yuan Shi is a thief of the Han Dynasty, yet he uses force to invade our territory. Who in the world can tolerate this? Liu Bei stopped Pang Tong again. He repeatedly modestly said that he and Pang Tong were from the same sect. He couldn't bear to seize the foundation of the same sect and so on. Zhang Song said, Imperial uncle, if you don't take heaven's gift, you will be punished instead. Now Liu Zhang is weak and can't defend the territory. Imperial uncle will take his place. When you succeed, if you consider his contribution to the foundation and confer him the title of Duke or Marquis, you will repay him with righteousness. How can you betray him? Liu Bei suddenly understood. He said, don't talk about gold and stone. I will engrave it in my heart. Only then did Zhang Song return to Chengdu. When he saw Liu Zhang, Zhang Song changed his story. Liu Zhang asked about Yuan Shi's words. Zhang Song presented a letter and said, Duke of Yan said that Sichuan is remote and he doesn't want to take the trouble to go on an expedition. My lord only needs to pay tribute to the imperial court year after year. Naturally, everything will be peaceful. My lord will be conferred the title of Marquis of Sichuan and will rule Ezhou for generations to come. Liu Zhang read the letter and said with great joy, what's so difficult about paying tribute? I didn't pay tribute to the imperial court in Yadu before only because Zhang Lu obstructed me. In addition, the various states are divided and the roads are impassable. Now that the Duke of Yan has already pacified the north and eliminated Zhang Lu, the roads are all open. It's only right that I pay tribute and become a subject. Finished speaking, Liu Zhang rewarded Zhang Song. After Zhang Song expressed his gratitude, he said, My lord, you invited Liu Bei to Sichuan only to resist Zhang Lu. Now that Zhang Lu has been pacified and the Duke of Yan has no intention of taking over Sichuan, my lord should expel Liu Bei as soon as possible to avoid raising a tiger and inviting future trouble. Liu Zhang hesitated. Xuanda and I are of the same sect. At first, I invited him because I had something to do. Now that I have nothing to do, I want to expel him. It's inevitable that people will say that I'm cold-hearted. Someone next to him said, My lord, you're right. Moreover, the Duke of Yan, Yuan Shi, said that he wanted to withdraw his troops. Who knows if he's telling the truth? If you expel Liu Bei and Yuan Shi really attacks, it'll be difficult to invite him again. Zhang Song was shocked and hurriedly looked over. The person who spoke was the chief secretary, Huang Quan. In fact, in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Huang Quan was opposed to inviting Liu Bei to Sichuan. However, that was then and this was now. The situation was different. At that time, Liu Zhang's enemy was Zhang Lu, who couldn't threaten Sichuan at all. Now, he was facing Yuan Shi, who was a big threat and completely capable of taking over Sichuan. Therefore, Huang Quan advised Liu Zhang not to expel Liu Bei so easily. Another person next to him said, Liu Bei is also a big threat in Sichuan. My lord, why don't you wait for a few days and observe the Duke of Yan's movements? If you return to the imperial court, you can expel Liu Bei if you really don't have any intention of taking over Sichuan. If the Duke of Yan stays in Hanzhong and doesn't go, it's not too late to discuss countermeasures. Zhang Song looked again. This time, the person who spoke was the chief secretary of Ezhou. His name was Wang Lei. Among the civil officials who were loyal to Liu Zhang, only Huang Quan, Wang Lei, and the others were silent. Liu Zhang asked Zhang Song, What do you think we should do? Zhang Song said, Chief Secretary Wang Lei is an experienced strategist. Don't be hasty, don't be slow. We can do it. Liu Zhang also liked this kind of moderate method. Therefore, he ordered the dispatch of mounted scouts to investigate the movements in Hanzhong. After Zhang Song returned home, Fa Zheng and Meng De happened to come to visit. Zhang Song had a secret discussion with the two men. He said, Previously, I thought that Liu Bei was a wise ruler, or rare one in the world. This time I went to Hanzhong and saw the Duke of Yan, Yuan Shi. Only then did I know what a wise ruler is. In my opinion, the Duke of Yan will unify the world sooner or later. We will offer Ezhou to the Duke of Yan. Fa Zheng laughed and said, For you, Zhang Yongnian, to hold him in such high esteem, the Duke of Yan must have outstanding ability. Meng De said, I have also long heard of the Duke of Yan's great name. He swept the Chao family, Shiliang, and trampled the Wuhuan. His martial art prowess shook the world. Achieving success at such a young age, he still respects the virtuous and loves the scholars. If he is truly the destined ruler, I will follow him. The three of them laughed and discussed the matter over drinks all night. Several days later, Liu Zhang's mounted scouts came back with news. The Duke of Yan had withdrawn from Hanzhong, passed through Wu Pass, and returned to Chang'an. He left Great General Zhang Ji to guard Hanzhong and relocate the Hanzhong population to enrich Chang and Sanfu territory. Liu Bei was delighted. The Duke of Yan really does not have any intention of taking Yizhou, he said. Thereupon they gathered together to discuss how to send Liu Bei out of the border. While they were discussing, suddenly one of the two guards at Fushui Pass, Yang Huai, came to see Liu Bei with a letter from Liu Bei. Liu Zhan opened the letter and read it. Frowning, he said, "Xuanda says there is a change in Jing province. Sun Ce seems to have the intention to betray the alliance and attack. He earnestly asks me to send 30,000 elite troops and 100,000 grains to assist him. What should we do?" Yan Huai said, "My lord, you do not know. Since Liu Bei entered Sichuan, he has shown benevolence and won the hearts of the people. What is his intention? It is clear as day. Now he is asking for troops, horses, money, and grain. We must not give it to him. Otherwise, we will be holding firewood to extinguish the fire." Liu Zhan was hesitant. Others, including Secretary Huang Quan and Supervisor Liu Ba, advised Liu Zhan. Zhang Song, Fa Zheng and the others also advised Liu Zhan. Seeing that everyone was in agreement, Liu Zhan compromised. He sent 4,000 old and weak soldiers and 10,000 grains to Liu Bei. At the same time, he sent Yang Huai back to guard Fushui Pass. But 2 days later, Liu Zhan received bad news. Fushui Pass had been lost. The two guards, Yang Huai and Gao Pei, had been beheaded by Liu Bei. After asking for the reason, he found out that Liu Bei had received Liu Zhang's reply and started cursing him. He also used the excuse of returning to Jing province to lure Yang Huai and Gao Pei to send him off. Speaking of which, Yang Huai and Gao Pei were bursting with self-confidence. They actually carried sharp weapons and wanted to assassinate Liu Bei when he was sending him off, so as to avoid future troubles. For some reason, the matter was exposed. At the time, Liu Bei was wearing heavy armor, and his subordinates caught Yang Huai and Gao Pei like they were chickens. They took out sharp weapons and beheaded them on the spot. After hearing this bad news, Liu Zhan regretted his actions. "I really didn't expect Liu Bei to have such wild ambitions. He really wants to seize my foundation. I even treated him as a fellow disciple. What should we do now?" Huang Quan said, "Now that Liu Bei has already taken Fushui Pass, his next step will definitely be Luochang. Luochang is Chengdu's barrier, and its strategic location is very important. My lord, you can send elite troops to guard Luochang all night. Even if Liu Bei has elite troops and fierce generals, he won't be able to come over." Liu Zhang hurriedly ordered the 4 generals of Shu, Liu Gu, Ling Bao, Zhang Ren and Deng Xian to gather 50,000 troops and guard Luochang. The 4 generals received the order and set off. After the 4 generals left, Zhang Song saw this opportunity and said, "My lord, Liu Bei has the wisdom of a crouching dragon and a young phoenix, and the courage of Guan, Zhang and Zhao. Can the 4 generals resist Liu Bei?" Liu Zhan also felt a little guilty. "Then what should we do?" Zhang Song said, "I have a plan that can make Liu Bei not dare to look Sichuan in the eye." Liu Zhan was overjoyed. "A plan?" Zhang Song said a few words. It was precisely because the strategists of Shu entered, the heroes of the Central Plains were lured in. As for what will happen in the future, it will be explained next time. The ending was changed from a poem in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's interesting, but don't take it seriously. Chapter 1331. Zhang Song said, "Liu Bei has always been afraid of one person, Cao Cao. Ever since Liu Bei took Su province, he has been defeated by Cao Cao many times. Exhausted, he fled to Jingzhou to rely on Liu Biao. Although Cao Cao has been destroyed, Duke Yan Yuanxi's military strategy is 10 times better than Cao Cao's. If we can ask Duke Yan to send troops to save Sichuan, Liu Bei will definitely flee in panic and no longer dare to spy on Sichuan." Liu Zhan nodded and said, "The Duke Yan is indeed more intelligent than Cao Cao. His strength is also several times stronger than Liu Bei. However, since the Duke Yan doesn't have the intention to take Sichuan, is it because Shu province is remote and he doesn't want to mobilize people to stop Liu Bei? Zhang Song smiled and said, "My lord, you worry too much." In the Duke Yan's eyes, Liu Bei is different from a lord. He won't be satisfied with Sichuan. If Liu Bei takes Sichuan, he will definitely invade Hanzhong and even threaten Guangzhong, imitating the story of Emperor Gaozu. Therefore, to the Duke Yan, my lord has no problem with Sichuan, but Liu Bei will definitely not be allowed to take Sichuan. Zhang Song's words implied that Liu Zhang was not as ambitious as Liu Bei. However, Liu Zhang was not angry and said, "The Duke Yan has already returned. I still need to trouble you to persuade him to return." Huang Quan hurriedly said, "My lord, you can't. Liu Bei is a jackal and the Duke Yan is a tiger and leopard. In order to drive away a jackal, we invited a tiger. Isn't that drinking poison to quench thirst?" Wang Lei also persuaded, although the Duke Yan doesn't seem to have the intention to take Sichuan, if he is invited, he will definitely change his mind and seize Yi province. Yi province can stop Liu Bei, but we can't stop the Duke Yan's army. My lord, please consider carefully. Liu Zhang hesitated. Zhang Song suddenly looked up and laughed. Liu Zhang frowned and said, "Why are you laughing?" Zhang Song's laughter stopped. He said, "I am laughing at Huang Zhubo, Wang Zhongzhu, they are all worrying about nothing. We only need to contact the Duke of Yan and ask him to send a general to attack Jiaoming Pass and cut off Liu Bei's escape route. When did we ask the Duke of Yan to enter Sichuan? If Liu Bei's escape route was cut off, he would run out of provisions and the morale of the troops would be disrupted. Sooner or later, he would be captured by the Lord. This way, there is no need for the Duke of Yan to enter Sichuan. We can already stop Liu Bei." Liu Zhang nodded and said, "The Duke of Yan has no intention of plotting against Yi province. Although his forces are powerful, they are harmless to me." Zhang Biejia's words are reasonable. Zhang Song said, "My lord, please send the letter as soon as possible, lest the Duke of Yan's army withdraw from Hanzhong." Huang Quan and Wang Lei continued to persuade him. Liu Zhang scolded, "I don't even have the confidence to stop Liu Bei, what can you do? If you don't let me contact the Duke of Yan, sooner or later I will become Liu Bei's prisoner." After ordering the two to retreat, Liu Zhang quickly wrote a letter, still wanting to send Zhang Song north to Hanzhong to ask for help. Zhang Song declined the request because his foot disease had flared up, making it difficult for him to travel far. Then he recommended his good friend Fa Jing to bring the letter north. Liu Zhang agreed. Hanzhong, Nanjing City. Zhang He received a letter from Fa Jing. He asked Fa Jing to stay at the inn and rest for the time being, and then he went to report to Bai Xiaowen. At this time, on the surface, Bai Xiaowen had already left Hanzhong, but in reality, he still stayed, quietly waiting for a good opportunity. After reading Liu Zhang's letter asking for help, Bai Xiaowen laughed heartily and said, "Zhang Song is really my right-hand man. He has perfectly carried out my initial plan." Hearing that the messenger was Fa Jing, Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, "This is Zhang Song who does not forget his old friend. He does not want to be important alone, he wants his friend to enjoy wealth and honor together. That's why he asked Fa Jing to come. Quickly summon him, don't delay." Bai Xiaowen personally received Fa Jing. When Fa Jing saw Bai Xiaowen, he said happily, "I knew it. The Duke of Yan can't possibly have no interest in Yizhou. Withdraw from Hanzhong. That Zhang Yongyan is still trying to hide it from me." Bai Xiaowen laughed and said, "With Xiao Zhi's talent, why would I need Zhang Yongyan to make it clear? My interest is in Sichuan, I can't let Liu Zhang set up a separatist regime outside, and I can't give it to Liu Bei even more." Fa Jing nodded and said, "Duke of Yan, although the current situation is favorable, it is not the best time to enter the game." Bai Xiaowen laughed and asked, "Xiao Zhi, when do you think is the best time to enter the game?" Fa Jing said, "Liu Bei has already attacked Fushui Pass, his troops are heading straight for Luochang. Although Liu Bei dispatched troops to guard Luochang, We estimate that with the strength of 2 armies, Lu Gu and the other 4 generals will not be able to stop Liu Bei. Sooner or later, Luocheng will be captured by Liu Bei. When the time comes, Liu Bei's troops will be heading straight for Chengdu. However, Chengdu's city walls are high and thick, there are still several tens of thousands of elite troops inside. The provisions inside are enough to last for a year. Under the situation where there is hope outside, Liu Zhang will not surrender immediately. Chengdu can still hold on for a while. The Duke of Yan will wait until Luocheng falls before dispatching his troops. There are 2 advantages. First, Liu Bei's battle line will be stretched out, he won't have time to return to Jiaming Pass and Fushui Pass to reinforce them. Moreover, their retreat route will be cut off by the Duke of Yan, they won't be able to take care of each other. Second, Liu Zhang has lost more than half of Sichuan. Under the situation where he can't even protect himself, he won't have the ability to stop the Duke of Yan from capturing Sichuan. This is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, Zhang Song once said that you are filial, upright, and talented. Sure enough, you are worthy of your reputation. There is still one more advantage to the plan you have devised for me. Third, if Liu Bei is trapped in Sichuan, Jingzhou will have no ruler. Then I can order a general to seize it. Fa Jing praised, the Duke of Yan's plan is far-sighted. I am not as good as you. Immediately, Bai Xiaowen set up a banquet and asked Sun Yu and the generals to accompany him. During the banquet, someone suddenly came to report that there was an urgent letter from Yadu. Bai Xiaowen opened the letter. When he read it, he could not help but frown slightly. Sun Yu observed his expression and asked, My lord, did something happen in Yadu? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, It's not that something happened in Yadu. It's just that Sun Su of Jiangdong has made his move. Finished speaking, he passed Dong Zhao's letter to everyone present. Fa Jing was no exception. After Sun Yu read it, he was shocked and said, Sun Su sent troops to the north to attack Wancheng. His troops are heading straight for Hefei. My lord, Hefei is the throat of Huainan. Its strategic position is extremely important. If Jiangdong obtains Hefei, they can go north to Su and Yu and fight for the Central Plains. If the Central Plains is Hefei, they can choke Jiangnan. If Hefei is lost, the land of Huainan will no longer belong to my lord. Among everyone present at the banquet, only Sun Yu, one of Cao Cao's former subordinates, understood the strategic importance of Hefei the most. How could Bai Xiaowen not know the importance of Hefei? In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, after the Battle of Red Cliffs, Sun Su's good son, 100,000 Zhong Mao, personally went to war several times to occupy Hefei. Of course, he was also unfortunate enough to become Zhang Xiaoyao Jing when Yuan's big gift bag of experience. Legend has it that he was able to break through 100,000 with 800,000 experience points, leaving behind a thick and heavy stroke in the history of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Because of Zhang Liao's outstanding performance against Sun Quan, Hefei has been firmly in the hands of Cao Group. Zhang Yi said, the Central Plains is the foundation of our army. The importance of the 2 rivers is secondary. My lord, you should not hesitate. You should quickly return to Yadu and lead the troops south to solve the problem of Hefei. Chapter 1332. Fa Jing hurriedly said, Isn't the matter of conquering Sichuan a bubble? Sun Yu said, Although Sichuan is important, it's not as important as the Central Plains. It's the foundation of my lord. Fa Jing sighed, Sun Su's attack on Hefei may not be an all-out attack. Instead, it's to attract the Duke of Yan's forces and create a safe environment for Liu Bei to conquer Sichuan. I'm sure that Liu Bei and Sun Su must have reached some kind of agreement. The generals in the banquet didn't seem to believe it. After all, Liu Bei and Sun Su had been fighting for Jingzhou for a long time. Their brains were about to explode. Bai Xiaowen nodded, that's reasonable. Perhaps Liu Bei has promised Sun Su that after conquering Yizhou, he will cede the remaining half of Jingzhou to Jiangdong. In this way, Jiangdong and Sichuan can work together to resist the imperial army and avoid being unified by me. Bai Xiaowen's vision was broader than that of native strategists like Sun Yu. He knew Zhuge Liang's diplomatic ability. He also knew that Jiandong's top hunters cut in. It's not rare for two families to unite or even form an alliance. After many battles, Bai Xiaowen's ability to plan and strategize had reached a consensus among his subordinates. Hearing that he had confirmed the Sun Lu alliance, the generals no longer had any doubts. "So, Duke of Yan means?" Fa Jing whispered. He felt that Bai Xiaowen was too calm after receiving the news. He just frowned slightly. Either Duke Yan had an amazing ability to maintain his composure at such a young age, and his countenance would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. Or, Duke Yan had long been mentally prepared for this and had a plan to deal with it. Therefore, Fa Jing tentatively asked. Bai Xiaowen smiled. "When I went to Hanzhong, I already ordered 2 generals, Zhang Liao and Su Huang, to guard Yuzhou. Hefei isn't an emergency, so I ordered the 2 generals to guard it and send elite troops. Sichuan must not be given to Liu Bei. Otherwise, once the tripartite balance is formed, it will be difficult to stabilize the world in a short time." Fa Jing was delighted. He left his seat and bowed. "The Duke of Yan is brilliant." Sun Yu said, "My lord, Sun Tzu is a valiant warrior. Jiandong's troops are also elite troops. What should we do if they attack Hefei?" Bai Xiaowen said, "I already have a plan on how to guard Hefei." Bai Xiaowen immediately ordered Zhang Xiu and Qiao Rui to lead their troops back to Hefei. Before they set off, Bai Xiaowen handed Zhang Xiu a long box and said, "General Zhang, open it when you arrive at Hefei. This box contains 100,000 brave soldiers. If used properly, it would be enough to resist Sun Tzu. General Qiao, help defend the city from the side. Do not slack off." Zhang Xiu did not understand what he meant. He took the box and left with Qiao Rui. Bai Xiaowen sighed slightly. Although he had expected Sun Tzu to send troops at this time, it still hit his weak spot. Originally, Shou Chuan had to face the civil officials and generals under Liu Bei and was already under a lot of pressure. Liu Bei's advisors brought Pang Tong and Su Shu, while the generals brought Guan Yu and Zhao Yun, as well as the newly recruited Huang Zhong and Wei Yin. In order to guard against Dong Yuwu, Bai Xiaowen had already arranged for Zhang Liao and Su Huang to guard Yuzhou. Now, he had no choice but to send Zhang Xiu away. Other than Zhang Xiu, he only had Ma Chao, who was a lord-ranked general. In terms of military strength, Bai Xiaowen did not have much of an advantage. His only advantage was that Bai Xiaowen had Han Meng, Han Qiong, Gao Lan, and a group of rare lord-ranked generals. They were much stronger than Liu Bei's ordinary lord-ranked generals. Of course, the current strategy was beneficial to Bai Xiaowen. Liu Bei was currently entering Luocheng, and he was totally unprepared against Jiaming Pass. As long as he took down the pass, Jingzhou's reinforcements to Liu Bei would have to take a long route, and their efficiency would be greatly reduced. When the time came, Bai Xiaowen and Liu Zhang would be able to pincer Liu Bei. Of course, the Battle of Red Cliff had not happened, and the mid-plains were still strong. Even if Bai Xiaowen fought on 2 fronts, he would not have too many troops. He could casually pull out 200,000 troops to defend Hefei. As such, Bai Xiaowen was not too worried about Hefei. In Yizhou, he did not have any overwhelming strength. Bai Xiaowen wanted to use Fa Zheng's slow attack strategy, watching as Liu Bei took down Luocheng and went deep into Chuanzhong before sending troops in. Immediately, Bai Xiaowen ordered Zhang He to write a reply to Liu Zhang. Under Bai Xiaowen's instructions, Zhang He wrote that the Duke of Yan was already on the way back to Yedu and did not see the letter. He had already rushed to report to the Duke of Yan to convince the Duke of Yan to go down south to save Sichuan. He hoped that Liu Zhang could protect the city and not let Liu Bei take advantage of it. Fa Jing left with the letter. Zhang Xiu brought his troops out of Hanzhong and returned to the mid-plains. Along the way, Zhang Xiu was really interested in the long box that the Duke of Yan gave him. When Jia Su saw that, he asked curiously, "General, why do you like this box so much? Is there something hidden within?" Zhang Xiu did not hide anything from Jia Su. "Before sending me out, the Duke of Yen gave me this box, saying that there are 100,000 troops in it that will be able to go against Sun Tzu. However, the Duke of Yen instructed me to only open it when we reach Hefei. Peng. Mister, what are you doing? When Jia Su heard that, he did not hesitate to tear open the seal of the box and open it. Hearing Zhang Xiu's shock, Jia Su smiled. What does it matter if I open it earlier or later? As long as I can help the Duke of Yen defend Hefei, he will not care about these details. I already have a guess in my heart, and I'm just opening it to verify it. Zhang Xiu went over to take a look. Inside the box, there was a sheathed sword and a letter, which was not sealed. Jia Su pointed at the unsigned and unsealed letter and smiled. Duke Yen didn't sign or seal it, so this letter is for everyone to read. I'll take a look first. He then took out the letter to read. Zhang Xiu was a little nervous, but he was still curious, so he did not stop Jia Su. After Jia Su read the letter, he was stunned. Zhang Xiu asked, Mister, what does the letter say? This sword seems to be the one that the Duke of Yen always carries around, and it is called Etienne. Why did he seal it in the box? Is it really worth 100,000 troops? Jia Su did not say anything and passed the letter to Zhang Xiu. The letter said, For the Battle of Hefei, my army has 3 generals, Zhang Liao, Su Huang, and Zhang Xiu. They are well prepared, but they lack intelligence. Today, Jia Su is conferred the title of military advisor. With this sword, I will be in Hefei. The soldiers of the 3 armies will bow down and listen to my orders. If anyone disobeys, I will kill him with this sword. Zhang Xiu was shocked. The 100,000 troops that the Duke of Yen mentioned is you, mister. Jia Su sighed and said, The Duke of Yen already knows what I am thinking. In my 2 schemes, I failed to move ahead of the Duke of Yen, but I still have the Duke of Yen's trust. How can I not repay him with my intelligence? You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.